IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. We're coming back at you guys with the Upon Further Review. Obviously, Notre Dame played in the national championship last night. Didn't get the result that they wanted, like we talked about in the post-game show. However, Brian and I are back here today to dive more into the film. And we've said it all year long that, him and I are both people who are seek to understand. And that's one thing that I love about my job. And I love that I get to do at Irish Breakdown is, when I was a fan and I was just watching, I couldn't go back and watch all 22 film. It was if Notre Dame would lose, I just kind of had to, just be a fan and say, well, I just hope for better luck next time they play. But all day today, we've been able to dive into the film and we were able to take a look at some of the things that went right and a good amount of the things that went wrong. And I found my understand as to why the result was the way that it was. And I'm going to leave it at that because we have a lot that we have to jump into today. So you guys know how Upon Further Review works, right? What we're going to do is we're going to revisit the Notre Dame keys to victory. First, we're going to talk about the overall team and see if they pass, fail, where they met there. And then we're going to talk about the offensive keys to victory and where they met those and where they came up short. And then same thing for the defense. After that, we're going to go and we're going to talk through some of the things that we've seen on film and some things that we didn't uncover in the postgame because there was a lot to unravel after last night's game in the postgame show. So after going through and watching film, we were able to take a deep dive and we were able to look at some of the things that we might not have seen live. And there's a good amount of things that we're going to be covering today. So, Brian.
I have to admit, I was more frustrated than I expected to be after watching the film. There was even more missed opportunities in this game, more sloppiness than I saw. And it's not meant to take anything away from Ohio State, but they made things way too easy with some of the stuff that they did on both sides of the ball, especially defensively. So we're going to dive into a lot of that, Trev, but it was a frustrating watch. And I honestly was kind of at peace with what I was going to watch. And then after I dove into the film today, I mean, I'm sitting there texting you and I'm sending you little video, you and Vince video clips, and I'm just about to lose it, blow a gasket. And it's just like, my goodness, there were so many opportunities for things that we saw in the second half should have been happening in the first half. And it was just a little late to get it fixed. And we're going to have a lot to talk about in those areas. There's no doubt about that.
Well, you guys know how we do it here. We're going to jump right into the keys to victory. And I know the schedule last week was a little bit wonky because, the game's on a Monday. Brian was under the weather, still not back to 100%. But here at Irish Breakdown, we're still going to pod like champions, right? And so what we did is last week, I believe it was on Saturday, we went through our keys to victory and what Notre Dame needed to do in order to walk away with a victory. And we began with the team keys to victory, Brian. And the first one that we had talked about, and it's going to be interesting to see where we kind of take this one, but first and foremost, Notre Dame had to win the first quarter because they were coming into this offense. They'd only scored once in the first quarter against Indiana, but we talked about how their second scoring drive also began in the first quarter, just a 9.
Kind of like Ohio State's last night.
Yeah.
Right.
But their defense had allowed 0 points in the first quarter. And technically that stayed true last night, So there were 0 points allowed in the first quarter. However, Ohio State did still score.
Technically, yes.
But Ohio State did still score on their opening possession. So, Brian, walk us through point number one.
Well, I mean, the whole point about this was, it's kind of a plus because technically we said win the first quarter, but the principle behind it was you couldn't allow Ohio State to jump out to a big lead. I didn't anticipate, these two teams kind of coming out and both having, what was it, like Notre Dame took over 9.5 minutes off the clock. Ohio State took 6 minutes off the clock on their first touchdown drive and then 6 minutes off the clock on their second touchdown drive. And, it's like what we were afraid of happening in the first quarter still happened. It just got prolonged a little bit into the second quarter. So technically this is a check for the defense or for the team. but it's not. I mean, it wasn't. They didn't accomplish what the goal was. The goal was is to either A, keep the points down early and not let Ohio State just go down the field and score on their first multiple possessions. Well, they did exactly to Notre Dame what they did to Tennessee and Oregon, right? I mean, basically scoring on each possession early. It's just Notre Dame made them work for it, I guess, a little bit more than those teams did because they didn't give up the big bombs and they, like they had to run more plays and take more time.
Right.
But it's not like they, and Notre Dame put them into a lot of third down situations that they were able to convert. But, those are different things that you look at and say, those are some of those missed opportunities that they had last night. And, and they were frustrating, and then the offense started off well, things started off well, but obviously, they didn't really keep it rolling after that. So yeah, it was frustrating.
Yeah, I know we're going to dive into the offense and the start that they had once we get to that portion. But yeah, I mean, I guess technically it's a check on a technicality. I put it like a check with a little asterisk, right? It's, did they win the first quarter? On paper, yes. But it's what happened afterward and what transpired basically after the first quarter, which makes it really tough to give the check. So I'm with you.
Yeah.
The second point that we had for the team was be the aggressor. So Brian, kind of walk us through, after watching film, where are we at with this one?
I actually think the offense accomplished this. The defense did not. And we'll talk a lot more about it when we dive into the offensive breakdown here, Trev. But I actually think the offense was aggressive. They took the fight right to Ohio State first drive of the game. And they bullied Ohio State. They took some shots. Well, they called some shots. They didn't execute them. But I think the offense was more aggressive than I think people think last night, both how they played and then also play calling. So I think in that regard, I'm happy with how the offense tried to take the fight to Ohio State. They did not play scared of Ohio State's defense. The defense was the exact opposite. They coached scared of Ohio State's offense. And there was a lot of mistakes early in the game where they were reacting to Ohio State more than they were taking the fight to Ohio State. And, you talk about how many times that the linebackers were getting swallowed up. Well, why are you asking them to sit there and read and react and go? You've allowed them to attack all year, and then now you're not going to let them attack. And then you're going to wonder why a bunch of sophomores are more blockable than they have been when you're not letting them do the things that made them so good in the first three playoff games and for much of the year. So this is a minus as a team because this is a team objective. And the reality is that when the best side of your team, the best part of your team goes into a game not being the aggressor, not being not taking the fight to the other team, then you're going to have a hard time beating a team like Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, the offense, it was definitely a lack of execution, right? The mindset of being aggressive was there for them, but until the second half, the execution was not there to follow. I'm right there with you on the defense, and I'm going to leave it at that for now because I know we're going to dive into a lot once we get to that side of the football, but the defense was definitely what carried the minus.
And that's still disappointing, Trevor. I mean,
I know.
Again, I'll just repeat what I said last night. If I'm going to lose a game, I want to lose that game. I want to go down swinging. And last night, they did not go down swinging on defense. They didn't. I'm just – it's frustrating.
Yep.
Very frustrating.
Oh, yeah. Well, I understand. The third key that we had as a team, which, again, they actually won, was they had to win the turnover battle. So, Brian, kind of walk us through –
yeah, but like winning the turnover battle is not just at the end of the day, you have one more than your opponent. For Notre Dame, it's about you're doing things to get the ball back from the offense in a way that allows your team to have a shot to win the football game. And I don't count forcing a fumble when a team is about to go up on you 38-15 as winning the turnover battle. I mean, it's good that the Notre Dame offense didn't turn the ball over. That's a plus. And that's definitely a plus. But you did not come close to forcing any turnovers prior to that point. And the turnover they've had was at the end of like a 30-yard gain. and they ended up not getting points of it because, again, you did it on the opposite side of the field. You didn't do it in their territory. So this is a minus for me because what got you here is that aggressive, forcing mistakes type of play, and you didn't get that in this game. And so even though it's +1 on the stat sheet, it's not the kind of winning the turnover battle that we talk about, because we don't just talk about you have 2 and they have 1, or they have 2 and you have 1. It's about impactful turnovers. And what has worked for Notre Dame all season is the impactful turnovers, the ones that are setting you up for success. And they didn't have those last night. The only turnover they forced last night, Trevor, was one that kept it from being a blowout. I mean, it was 31-15, correct?
Yep.
Right. This was after the Jaden Greathouse touchdown drive.
Yep.
All that, and it was a great play by Drake Bowen, great hustle and all that kind of stuff. But all that did was keep you from just getting completely blown out, because you didn't get a score out of it. It was deep in your own territory when you recovered it, and they had just broke off a long play. So, again, for what I mean and what I care about when I talk about the turnover battle is not just, +2, +1, -1, -2. It's about impacting the game. And the turnovers Notre Dame forced last night, they didn't impact the game from the standpoint of other than it prevented you from getting blown out. Something like that would have been needed earlier in the game, but they weren't playing aggressive enough to make those kind of plays. I mean, guys were they weren't, and that was very unfortunate. So even here, Trevor, and it just honestly, what frustrates me, Trevor, is that it was indicative of what we said going into the game that did not happen last night, which is if Notre Dame's going to win this game, they've got to play their game. And that's an execution thing, and that's also a looking at it from a style of play standpoint also. And that was the biggest disappointment, is I don't feel like they were put in a position to impact the game the way that they have impacted the game all season on defense. And that's just going to leave a little bit of a bitter taste in my mouth, to be completely honest with you, about this defense. Because I can recognize the defense was phenomenal all season. I mean, it was. And as I've said before, me being frustrated with last night doesn't have anything to do with trying to take away from the great job Al Golden did all season. Doesn't at all. I mean, Al Golden is a big reason why NotreAme won 24 games the last 2 years, the defense he's run. But last night, he didn't have it. And, it just, you're not going to win games like this against teams like Ohio State, Trevor, if you don't play that way. And that was so frustrating.
I think so. That's what makes it more frustrating for me, is the defense was what it was all season, right? Like, I mean, we talk a lot about that 2019 LSU team, right? And for some of the big names that they had on that defense, that wasn't a great defense. Their offense just put up 45 points a game, and so you want to talk about, the offense being a complement to the defense. Makes your job a little bit easier on defense if you average allowing, 24, 28 some odd points a game, but the offense essentially doubles that output, right? And so when they were making their playoff run, they just kind of knew the defense was what it was. But I think that's what's frustrating for me the most about how the defense performed last night, because they did perform the way that they did. The defense was the side of the ball that got them there. The defense was really good for 2 straight years. And I think that's what's really frustrating to me, is it's not like the defense just all season long was inconsistent and had moments where they just lapsed and there was just schematic headaches and tackling headaches. And it was, he had a bad night, and I can recognize that. And I'm with you. That doesn't take away from what they did in the regular season. It's just frustrating that the bad night was last night. So I'm with you. I'm with you on that one. I do have a question for you, which I have no opinion either way. This is just something that I thought of while the show was going on. Would your opinion on the turnover not being impactful change if Notre Dame's offense came away with points on that drive?
Probably not, because the scenario is still the same.
Sure.
That turnover kept you from getting blown out. It was not, and it was something that happened like way down the field. It wasn't something that was an incredibly momentum changing game the way it needed to. Like, imagine if that first drive of the game, Ohio State goes down and scores, your offense goes 3 and out, they get the ball, they're driving, and you make that kind of play then.
Sure.
Now you're in a different situation. Now, here's the thing. If it actually happened, perhaps I changed my mind. But just how I'm feeling right now, I don't know that would have changed a whole lot.
Sure.
But, if they'd have gone down and scored, all of a sudden it's 31, 23. And, that happened, that was early fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Right? When that fumble happened.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, just trying to be honest, maybe. But I just still feel like when you're making those kind of plays, when you're way down,
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's definitely the what if. So I'm with you.
And guys, I don't care about heart and all that stuff. Like, we already talked about that last night, right? None of this has anything to do with heart. We covered it. First thing we talked about last night is this team played with great heart, right? So I don't need to keep repeating the same. Like, this show's not about repeating the same stuff we talked about last night. This is a film breakdown. This isn't like an emotional big picture breakdown of the game. We know that they played hard. The team never quit. All those things are phenomenal. That's not what this is about. This is a film breakdown of the game from last night, right? Not a feelings or whatever else. It's a film breakdown. And it's about breaking down the execution of the game. Yes, the Notre Dame team played their butts off last night. But that's not what we're talking about. We didn't say the players didn't try. We didn't say they didn't hustle. We didn't say they didn't try hard. We said they didn't execute for, poo. And we're talking about the game plan. And we're talking about overall, the reality is that you did not put your players in a position, in my opinion, to be successful with some of the stuff that you did. And we'll talk even more about it when we get into the defensive section. But that's the whole point. Yeah, the kids played their butts off last night. And I don't think the job Al Golden did last night came from anything. I mean, I think he thought that was going to work. I don't think Al Golden went into the game last night thinking, we're probably going to get ripped apart with this defensive play game plan. I don't think that was the plan. I just don't think, like, no coach goes into a game, I guess I should say most, don't go to in a game saying like, hey, we're just going to, try to keep the points down and just not get killed. I mean, I shouldn't say that. There's games that happens, but it doesn't happen on this stage. It happens when you're like, Tennessee Tech and you're playing Alabama. You're like, look, we're just going to try to not get beat by 100. You know what I mean? Like, you're not trying to win that football game. We're an 0-10 FCS team and they're, an SEC powerhouse. That's a different deal, right? And this is my whole thing is as I said last night, Trev, I don't know that playing your game would have been good enough to win this game.
Sure.
But I would have much rather have gone down that way than what we saw last night. Because it was so easy. And look, that doesn't take away from what Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State did some good things. But as we'll break down later, some of the stuff that we saw last night, Trev, was just, I don't understand what they're doing here. Just from a basic alignment standpoint, I don't understand what they're doing. I don't know. You say, well, that kid sucks. Well, no, you're asking that kid to do something you should never be asking that kid to do against that particular team or that particular player. It's just, It's stuff like that. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. That after diving into film, that was the most frustrating thing for me. The injuries were what they were. But like I said last night, guys, I wanted to walk away from this game with the what if not being a factor. And it was, but it wasn't what if Ben Morrison was healthy? What if Riley Mills was healthy? To Brian's point, it's what if they just played the defense that they had played for 15 games before that? And we're just never going to know. Like that is what makes me frustrated about this one. And that's what popped off to me on film. That is what popped off to me on film. So continuing with the theme here, Brian, for revisiting the keys to victory, offense.
We're going to break these into segments, Trev. So
gotcha.
Any last thoughts that you have on this particular one before we move over to the offense?
No, it's interesting that we had the team victories that we did, right? Because you go through and it's one of those where on paper, right? Mm-hmm. Technically, they did 2 of them.
Right.
Technically.
Right.
But that's what goes into a football game, man. I mean, it's how you do it. It's not just what the final box score says.
Yeah. I think another team part that goes outside of what our keys to victory was is this is the first game Notre Dame really got dominated in the middle 8.
Yeah.
Like that's been their thing. Like The score in the middle eight is just, it was something like 100 something to like 10. I mean, it was nuts how much they dominated that. And Ohio State completely flipped that script on them. I mean, completely flipped that script. Ohio State scored a touchdown with 27 seconds left in the second quarter to make it 21-7. And then they scored on their first drive of the third quarter. I mean, just like that, it was 14-0 in the middle eight. I mean, that was a big moment. I mean, and what we'd seen from this Notre Dame team is, forcing stops in those situations. So instead of giving up that 6-yard touchdown pass to Quinshon Judkins where you lose him and he gets open behind the defense, and then you give up that 70-yard touchdown run, you don't give up that kind of run, or you hold them to field goals, and all of a sudden it's 20-7 or 17-7 instead of 28-7. And now all of a sudden you get that big play from Jaden Greathouse, and now all of a sudden you're down, 24-14, or you're down 21-14 or 20-14 because you've been holding them to field goals. And instead you're just giving up touchdown, and not keeping them in check. And that's when you're just, again, and it just goes back to, you gotta be who you are. And that was one where I don't necessarily blame the coaching per se, like the 70-yard run. That was one of those ones that I don't necessarily think was a bad calls. It was bad fits. You didn't execute and you got whooped up front. I mean, that's what it came down to. Not everything was, oh my gosh, Al Golden, what are you doing? Right? Some of it was just like, you're just not playing well enough. You're not tackling well enough. You're not fitting well enough. You're not playing your game. And that middle eight part was a big part of it.
Yeah, they got dominated in the middle eight. I mean, even in Notre Dame's first offensive possession of the second half, like, they still didn't have an answer. I mean, Notre Dame's offense didn't get going until there were 7.5 minutes left in the third quarter. And I had talked about that throughout the week. It's Notre Dame can't go on those droughts, because we had seen that at times in the season where the first drive they come out and they look electric and you think that they're about to drop a 50 ball. And then they just disappear for a quarter and a half due to lack of execution, due to Riley not seeing somebody down the field, due to a missed block here. And that's what we saw. That's what we saw. So that's going to do it for the overall team keys to victory, guys. But obviously, don't go anywhere. We have a lot that we still have to dig into and uncover here and talk about on the rest of the show. So before we get there, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family, anybody that loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. And the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian. It's time to dive into the offense. And we had 5 different keys to victory for the offense and what they needed to do to get the game started. So first one that we had, everybody knows what it is. It was start fast. Brian, walk us through what we got here.
I mean, it's a minus because what we say in start fast is not just scoring on your first drive. That part was good. I mean, and that was a great first drive. And the problem is it wasn't a tone-setting first drive because you didn't continue. The tone-setting drive is you do something that sets the tone for the game, and then that continues, and that's not what we saw. And honestly, it was really frustrating because one of the things about the offense is I've seen a lot of, Mike Denbrock didn't call a good game, and this is kind of how it is with your fandom, and we're all this way to a degree, right? Something doesn't go well, and it's, well, what's he doing? What kind of play calling is that? Oh, why was he more aggressive? Because you're reacting to what happened, not necessarily what was called or what the circumstances was. And one of those things was I didn't think the offense was aggressive enough. And so I want to kind of walk through that and kind of get to why did they not start fast? Because I think there was stuff there. And that's something that you and I were talking about before the show. But I mean, first drive of the game, there was aggressiveness there. I mean, you're trying to hit backside digs, you're hitting, throwing slot fades, you're running right at them, you're doing some motion stuff to get their linebackers going this way, which they didn't do as much of that later in the game. But first drive was great. Second drive, you come out, series 2, and first play. I'm trying to go back to this here real quick. You threw your first. Let me pull it up here real quick because I want to walk through it. But you get the long drive. You come out on your second possession, and the whole first quarter is like just one direction.
Oh,
they
no.
literally only one possession. Come out the first half, and people see you basically go 3 and out with a lot of mistakes. But like that drive should have been better.
Oh,
first play of the second drive, They run slot fade to the field of Jaden Greathouse. He smokes Jordan Hancock off the line. Like if Riley throws, not even a back shoulder, like he had a step and a half on him. I shouldn't say smoked him. When you're talking about playing a player as of Jordan Hancock's caliber, it was an impressive win. Against a lesser player, he'd have been 3 or 4 yards past him. But against Jordan Hancock, he had a step and a half on him. That ball's got to get thrown out to the sideline. That's a 25, 30-yard gain, first play of the second drive. A play that they had beaten Penn State on multiple times, a play that they beat Ohio State on later in the game. Riley's got to take that shot. He decides not to, doesn't feel good about it, so he's got to come back down to the dig and the crossing route, and it's there. Both technically were there, but the Mitchell Evans one, he was kind of coming behind the official, and I don't think Riley felt good about it, so he tries to go to the crosser, and he sails it over Bo Collins' head. Big missed opportunity, right? And so that had nothing to do with aggressiveness, Trevor. In fact, it was an aggressive play call. It's their bread and butter shot down the field passing play, and Riley didn't pull the trigger, and then he misses a crossing route. If he throws the crossing route to Bo Collins, worst case scenario in that play is Bo catches the ball and he falls down and it's a 5-yard gain. Best case scenario is he gets right outside of Jordan Faison and cuts it up for another 2 or 3 yards before he gets tackled by Igbinosun, who, by the way, should have been called for about 13 holding penalties yesterday. Yeah. There was one particular play. It looked like he had Bo Collins in the sleeper hold on a second down play, and no, I mean, literally and he's wearing a white sleeve, and it's literally across, he's behind him, it's literally across Bo Collins' face, and he's pulling him back by the freaking neck on a vertical and inside post-snap switch, no call. Like that kind of stuff can impact the game big time. No call. They held so bad yesterday and no calls. Now, again, do I think that's the difference in winning and losing? Not really, but you got to call that stuff because then maybe they got to defend you differently, and now all of a sudden some of that stuff starts breaking. It was bad. I'm going to put this actually on the board because there were several plays like this. That guy is a terrible corner because if he was actually called, if officials would call the stuff he does and he couldn't hold, he'd get smoked because whenever he can't hold, he gets burned. Like, they've got to find a new cornerback to replace him next year. I don't know why he keeps playing because eventually they're going to play a team. I got to think that they're going to either have a guy fast enough to beat him or they're going to have an officiating crew that calls it.
Yeah.
I've never seen a corner hold as much as that kid. It's ridiculous. But again, I'm saying that's why they lost, but stuff like that has to get called, and who knows what happens after those plays. But anyway, if Riley throws that ball, worst case scenario, it's 2nd and 5. Best case scenario, it's 2nd and 8. Most likely scenario, it's 2nd and 2. He turns it up 2-3 more yards. Best case scenario is Igbinosun misses the tackle and he's up the field for a 15, 20-yard gain. But you miss on it. And that was frustrating. So then you come back on the next play. It's 2nd and 10, and they get called for false start. If you go back and look at this play, oh my gosh, they're running counter. And JT Tuialamaloa, did I say it right? Tuimaloau. I tried to do it right. I tried to give her.
You were close.
It's the last time I'm going to talk about this kid, and I wanted to get his name right because I just felt it was disrespectful I didn't get his name right. He slants inside, and the linebacker from outside blitzes inside. And the guard, I think it was Rocco, logs him. And Jadarian Price is about to bounce it outside, and it's him and Lathan Ransom in space. And they blow it dead. Now, sometimes you see those holding, false starts, and you're like, well, it wouldn't have. Guys, it was going to bounce. The way that it was blocked up and the way that Ohio State was attacked, it was going to bounce. And if he makes Lathan Ransom miss, it's a touchdown. If Lathan Ransom tackles him, and he's a really good tackler, it's worst case scenario, 3rd and 2. Worst case scenario, 3rd and 2. And a false start by the receiver kills the play. That's just another example of just a bad missed opportunity by this football team of just something that was a complete unforced error. Just complete unforced error. Then you come out on 2nd and 15, and you have one of the worst 5-man pass protections I've ever seen in my life by Pat Coogan, where he opens up and he sticks his hand inside like, okay, I got to protect my left gap. No one threatens him to the A-gap right. And he looks at Cody Simon blitzing in the A-gap weak, and he just keeps holding his hand out like this and lets him run right through. I'm like, what in the world are you doing?
Doesn't even touch him.
Like, doesn't even try to touch him. It's a 5-man protection. It's a free release by the running back. You've got to step to that guy. If no one's threatening you A side, or strong side A gap, you've got to turn back weak side B gap. And he does nothing. And my whole thing is with the protection that they were in, if he blocks that guy, Riley may be able to step up inside and run for 7, 8, 9 yards. And if he can make Arvell Reese miss, he's got a first down. And then that leads to Riley getting out of the pocket, which leads to Charles Jagasol's hold. And then you go to the 3rd and 20 or the 2nd and 25. And it's a 5-man box against a 5-man block. They're running G-Rap, and Rocco dips inside of the tackle. If he goes outside of the tackle, he blocks Cody Simon, and they got a body on a body for Jadarian Price. And, as we've seen before, there's a lot of room to run there if Rocco gets outside. Now, I thought Rocco played overall a pretty darn good game in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
That was one of his mistakes. He's got to read that. He's got to read that block by Jagasol, bounce that sucker outside, because then Jadarian's going to follow him. And Jadarian was waiting on – you could see Jadarian's footwork. He was waiting on Rocco to lead him outside. And then when Rocco didn't go, Jadarian was like, oh, crap. And then he tries to he just kind of goes forward and runs for 2 yards. It was stuff like that really bothered me last night. Really bothered me last night because – you look at it and say, well, they weren't that was none of that of what happened on that drive. Not one thing was necessarily because of what Ohio State did. They brought a 5-man blitz against a 5-man protection. Oh, okay. It was literally an A-gap blitz by your middle linebacker. Oh, wow. No one's ever done that before. It wasn't even a stunt. It's just a blown assignment. Just a blown assignment by that. So, I look at that and you're just like, that's the kind of stuff you get frustrated by. Next series, you run a little snag route and Eli Raridon, it's covered. So Eli Raridon breaks free to the right. And if Riley was good at throwing guys open on plays like that, you might have something there. And he doesn't see it. So the ball doesn't come out. And this is on 2nd and 5. Worst case scenario, Trev, if he gets that ball out, it's first down. And you're moving.
You're in a good spot if you're saying worst case scenario is a first down.
Yes, that's worst case for Notre Dame. Best case for Ohio State because Eli was coming free, so they ran like a little option route, and Ohio State covered it, and they're running a backside crossing with Chris Mitchell. So Eli just says, "I'm going to go," and he's got Shane Simon beat by 5 or 6 yards. If he catches it and turns it upfield, there's not a defender getting into him for at least 5 to 7 yards. At least 5 to 7 yards. He's at least getting out past the 40, at least. Instead, Riley throws the ball away. It's 3rd and 5, and then the next play, the ball bounces off of your tight ends. But I still don't know what they were trying to run there because the play just never got going.
No, it was when I was watching it, it almost looked like the play clock was winding down. Like it was almost at 0. And I don't know if Pat Coogan just snapped it because he didn't want to delay a game. But that was one thing that I noticed watching it live. But even then, I don't know what the play call was supposed to be because it was just the second the ball hit the ground, everybody stopped what they were doing and it was scrambled, right? So, but yeah, a lot of missed opportunities, man. I mean, that's what's frustrating, right? And of course, whenever something goes wrong with the offense, when points aren't being put up on the board, you go to the person where the buck stops at.
Sure.
And yeah. And depending on the game, I completely understand that. But this was not – at some point, you tip your cap to Mike Denbrock, and it's – after watching film, it's like, what more did you want him to do there?
I mean, say, okay, have him better prepared to execute. I guess.
Yeah.
But it's like that first 3 drives, and this is not hyperbole, and there were things Ohio State, did later, but I can't point to one thing Ohio State did on the 2nd and 3rd drives that should have led to Notre Dame being stopped. Not one. And so again, it's like but against a team like this, Trevor, that's the whole point. We said going in, this is the 2 best teams in college football. So when you're playing what turns out to be the best team in college football, You can't set it before the game, Trev. You're going to get 6 or 7, 8 opportunities to have big plays in this game. You can't miss them. And they kept missing them and kept missing them and kept missing them early. And they ended up having more of those opportunities than they had a dozen of those opportunities in this game. And they hit on a couple of them late, and that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, there were so many. And I'm going to, a lot of this I'm going to put on film. And we're going to put it on the board in the next couple days. But that's what was frustrating for me was there were just things there that, like the 2nd and 5 to Raritan, Ohio State did a nice job of playing the route, but because they overplayed the route, that allowed Eli to come free on the, on the breakaway. And you're just like, man, if Riley could just had a little bit better feel there. And again, Riley Leonard played his tail off in this game.
Sure did. But
it's just one of those things where he just early in games, sometimes he just doesn't have that flow of reading the defense and getting the ball out. And even on the first drive of the game, he had 2 potential big plays, 2 in a row. He had Deion Colsey coming wide open on the backside dig. And on the very next play, it's like curl flat 101 to Chris Mitchell, and Riley just won't pull the trigger. And then he throws it late and it goes into the ground, and you're just like, I don't know what to tell you.
I was about to say, not only was it late, it was a bad ball. It was a bad ball late.
It almost looked like he was trying to throw it away. But it's like if he just bangs that drop, boom, it's, hit the, gather step, let it rip. It's a 15-yard game to Chris Mitchell. Now, did it hurt them big picture? No, because they scored on that drive. But if you score quicker, maybe you've got time to go get a late second quarter drive together. When you're down 21-7, maybe now there's 1:10 left on the clock, 2 minutes left on the clock, and your offense can go down and put a drive together. And we saw it in the third. The same thing happened in the first drive of the third quarter, Trev. It was the same stuff, where there was stuff there, but you couldn't take advantage of it.
And with that misthrow to Chris Mitchell, I agree with you. Like in terms of the scoreboard, big picture didn't have an impact because they did score on that drive. But you could make the argument maybe that's the throw that gets Riley into rhythm. You know what I mean? Like maybe that's the one where because that's what I've noticed with him. Like over the course of the season, I learned that yes, to some degree, like to get him in rhythm, he has to get hit. You let him run. I mean, the dude ran the ball 9 times on the first drive. I don't really know what more you could do to get him into a feel.
He played his butt off. I mean, he played hard. He took some,
Oh, yeah. But the thing that I noticed as he progressed throughout the season, kind of like a basketball player would, they just need to see that one go in, and then the groove starts to set in. So maybe that pass to Chris Mitchell is the one. Like it's just, yeah. I mean, a lot of people talk to me about, like what did you see like in the adjustments of Mike Denbrock from the first half to the second half that led to, it's like honestly like nothing earth shattering. The execution was just at a higher level. Yeah.
Well, and then you come out, Trev, and you're talking about the first play of the third quarter. First play of the third quarter. They go back to curl flat, and Jaden Greathouse is wide open coming out of the break. I mean, wide open. I'm actually gonna show this. Like, I'm gonna pull this up and show this. I don't understand why Riley is making the throw that he's making. So like right here, let me just go to this real quick.
Yeah.
I can't play the play because I can't show like a live clip, but you can see the still shot here. Like, look at that. Like he's waiting on Greathouse to present himself. This guy right here is flying downhill. That ball comes right here and he hits. I mean, that ball should be about to here by now. Like it should already be like, you're like, oh, there's a guy in his face. Yeah. The ball should have already been out. Like this ball should be about halfway to Greathouse right now. You should not have the ball in your hand when Greathouse is turning around to the football. When he turns around right there, that ball should be there. This is 1st and 10. You're down 28-7. You get no points in this drive. That ball's got to be there, man. Like that you're not going to get a cleaner window against a legitimate Power 5 team, much less the number 1 defense in the country.
I mean, the alley's there. I mean, look at it. I mean, it's
yeah. So it just was kind of stuff like that Riley missed early. Now, once he got going And it's almost kind of like what we saw against Penn State last night. There comes a point in time where Riley's just kind of like, F it. I got nothing to lose. And when he does that, I mean, you're like the guy we saw after this drive, like this was the last drive where I just felt like Riley was just afraid to pull the trigger. And then when they went down 31-7, Riley was just like, okay, I mean, I got nothing to lose now. I'm going to go ball out and give it everything I got. And that's what I love about the kid. But what we saw from that point on, that's the kid we saw at Duke in 2022. Just the gunslinger, the free-flowing, like letting it go, giving guys chances to make plays. Like that was a thing of beauty. And I love the fact that that's the last memory we're going to have of Riley Leonard, was him just balling out and leaving it all on the field and throwing some freaking dimes in that game last night, Trev. I mean, some dimes.
7.5 minutes in the third quarter on, he was dealing.
I mean, just
dealing.
Oh, my gosh, it was impressive. It was impressive. But against a team like Ohio State, Trev, though, you can't have those missed opportunities as often as they did. And it wasn't just Riley. It was Riley. It was the O-line. It was, running backs. It was, everybody had their moments where they didn't do what they needed to do. But those are just kind of, those are just kind of those things, Trev. And I don't know why it was that way. I don't know what they're doing from a teaching standpoint that is causing that. Like Sam Hartman had that problem last year with Gino Guidugli. And now Riley Leonard's having that problem where Sam Hartman was at times afraid to let her rip. And this year there's a lot of times where Riley was afraid to let her rip. Two guys that in the past we've seen against the same teams they played this year let it rip. That's a bit of a concern for me, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And
that's something that Mike Denbrock's going to have to evaluate, is like, what is being taught to these kids on a daily basis as far as rhythm throwing and timing and progressions and all that type of stuff that's causing some of these guys to maybe be a little bit too gun shy about some of these types of throws.
Yeah.
Because I've seen Riley make those throws before. And at Duke, at Notre Dame, and you just get these times where he won't pull the trigger. But once he started pulling the trigger, Trev, that 31-7 game turned to 31-23 in a hurry because of some of the throws he made in this game.
That second touchdown
with dudes in his face. I mean,
that second touchdown pass to Jaden Greathouse was filthy.
I don't even know if it was better than the third and long throw he made to him on the crossing route, on the over route, when he's getting drilled.
I know.
You're just like, that kid's when he's on, that kid is fun to watch.
Man.
Riley Leonard. He is fun to watch.
Man.
And, so like, this is one of those things where you're like, look, these are things that are going to hurt you in games like this. You don't question the kid's heart. You don't question his want to. You don't question his toughness. You don't question his ability.
Yeah.
You just got to execute better. It's all it is. This isn't like, oh, Riley cost him the game. There's a million things that cost him the game, and everybody played a role in it. Coaches, players alike. But it's those kind of missed opportunities that really kept the offense from having the kind of start that we're talking about here, Trev, because this all leads back to what the fast start aspect of it. And did Mike Denbrock call plays that gave them those opportunities? And my answer is, yeah, he did. They just didn't execute those plays at the O-line level, at the running back level, at the quarterback level. It's got to be able to make more of those plays. And, all year I've been very critical of the receivers not getting open and not getting separation. They were getting open last night, Trev.
Sure were.
Dion got open. Chris Mitchell was getting open. Jaden Greathouse was getting open. Jordan Faison was getting open. Even the third down on that drive we're talking about, if he just sees it's covered and just takes the crossing to Faison now, he waited till the corner had driven down on Faison. If he just gets that cross, you got to see it's not open. I got to come to my check down now. Let Faison catch that sucker before he gets to the sideline. He tucks it up. He probably gets first down there.
Yeah,
it's just stuff like that you just, against Ohio State, you can't miss those opportunities.
Yep.
And that's why they didn't have the fast start that they should have. Stuff was there, didn't execute.
Yep. Mistakes like that get magnified whenever you play a defense of that quality. They do, because a lot of people will go and they see like, well, look at the score and look at what it was at one point. It was 31-7 and yada, yada, yada. I understand that. But the reason why I appreciate diving into the film is it's not in other games in recent years where it's just like, oh, they're just overwhelmed. There's nothing that they could do. There was a lot that they could have done. It's literally just execute. For me, this starting fast also gets a minus because the one thing that I talked about in our Keys to Victory show was negative plays for whatever reason. This offense cannot overcome them. The second they got a false start on the second drive, I was standing in the living room. I was like, that's a drive. That's it right there.
And it still shouldn't have been.
Right.
But yes, it just gets them into funks.
Like, and then the next play, there's a holding. And then the play after that, it's Rocco misses a key block when he's pulling. And then it not only does it cascade, like it falls down a steep cliff. The second there is didn't go according to plan. Like, it's weird, man. It's been like that all season. And that's not just subjective to what happened in the game last night. It is whenever Notre Dame's offense is clicking, there's no procedural penalties. There's nothing that backs them up after a big play. It always just stalls. The second key, Brian, that we had was the offensive line must play at a high level, and that includes getting the run game going and protecting Riley Leonard. So after watching film, what did you see?
Overall, I give the O-line a check. I mean, you had the big mistake on that second drive, Coogan his mistake, and then Rocco with his mistake. But overall, I think there was a lot of good that I saw from the offensive line last night. I thought they were physical. I thought Charles Jagasaw had a heck of a game last night. Like, perfect example to me of why Charles Jagasaw needs to be your left tackle next year. And again, this isn't a knock on Anthony Knapp, because Anthony Knapp, I mean, for a freshman, a 290-pound freshman, I mean, battled his butt off this year and earned freshman All-American honors. And
absolutely.
I mean, and all type of things. But you look at that touchdown throw to Greathouse, the first one, the 31, when it was 31-7. JT comes off the line, and initially he rocks Jagasaw back, but then Jagasaw takes that back foot and drives it into the ground and stops him. And then Riley gets a clean throw off, and Jaden gets separation, and he takes off and puts a sick move on Caleb Downs.
Oh,
filthy. Sick move on Caleb Downs. He left Caleb Downs just reaching for air. Like, he drilled air on that play as Jaden spun out and went to a touchdown. Yeah. That's not even on Caleb Downs. That's one of those ones where you're not like, come on, Caleb, you're an All-American. You got to be – no. That he'd have done that to Xavier Watts. He'd have done that to Kyle Hamilton. He'd have done that. I mean, that was a sick move.
Yeah.
Sick move. And this is the stuff that I hear from, my sources in the program, whether it's talking to players, whether it's talking to parents of players and other people around the program. They're like, dude, Jaden Greathouse does stuff this stuff all the time in practice. Just doesn't get the ball in games. But we saw in this game, but that particular play is huge because Anthony Knapp, again, not his fault. He's 290-pound true freshman. Charles Jagasaw is almost 40 pounds heavier than Anthony Knapp is. Well, over 30 pounds. So he'd be, 34 pounds heavier than Charles Jagasaw and then Anthony Knapp. He's able to plant that back foot and stop and stone a guy like JT. Anthony can't. Not in space. And that kind of thing, it may not look like much, but that was huge because instead of Riley having a guy getting driven into him, remember the Purdue game, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where he's got the slot fade to Bo Collins, Jagasaw, just because of his girth and size, is not getting driven into the quarterback like that. And so this is going to sound like an attack on Anthony Knapp, and it's not, because there's nothing Anthony Knapp can do about that. He's 290 pounds. You know what I mean? He's also a freshman in the weight room. There's nothing he can do about that. When a senior like JT is going to, or Nick Scorton or whoever else is going to come off the line as seniors with 4 years in the weight room and they're almost as big as you, they're going to do that to you when you're retreating in pass pro and they're coming at you. That's what's going to happen. Now, maybe that doesn't happen to Anthony as a sophomore, junior, senior, but that's what happened to him this year. But when Jagasaw's in the game, he can plant that back foot and just stop you dead in your tracks. And we saw that several times. So I thought overall the pass pro was solid last night. Emil had a loss to Jack Sawyer early. He had a couple, though, where there was one play, they're running, I think it was first drive, and Jack Sawyer tries to slant in front of his face, and Emil literally lifts him off the ground and throws him.
Yeah.
5 yards. And I'm like, okay. So like I thought the O-line battled their butts off. Did Ohio State win some battles? Yeah, that D-line's going to win some battles. But I thought the O-line won a lot of battles too. And Riley had plenty of time to say, and even sometimes when he got hit late enough where he could still get throws off. Well, that happened to Will Howard, where they got some hits on him, but they gave him enough time that he can still get the throw off before he got hit.
Right.
And in the past, Riley couldn't even do that. He was getting hit before the ball came out. And I think early, I wonder if some of the issues Riley had is because he wasn't comfortable getting to the top, planting, and just letting it rip because maybe he wasn't as confident in the pass pro. And then as they showed him, hey, man, you just do your thing. We'll give you time. He looked to maybe get a little bit more confident that he would have the time he needed and get the throws off. I think that was an important piece of this. So, they didn't play great, but considering the competition, I thought the O-line did some good things last night. I give them a check. They needed them to play better, though.
Yeah.
They needed them to win that battle, and they didn't win the battle. They more held their own, is, I guess, a way of saying it. And you're not going to beat Ohio State when your offensive line simply holds their own, in my opinion. Or at least it's going to be a lot tougher to do that.
Yeah, when you go up against a quality defensive line, a really, really good defensive line like Ohio State's, you need your offensive line to be game wreckers, right? You need them to be not just like the play that you're talking about with Charles Jagusah, where he was able to plant his right leg and anchor and get a push back. You needed all five to play like that consistently throughout the night. And it just wasn't there. And to some degree, you also have to tip your cap because they're going up against really good guys. I thought Billy Schrouth handled himself pretty well against Tyleik Williams in pass protection.
There's one play he got beat in pass pro by 91. One play early, and outside of that, I agree with you.
Yeah.
But again, that goes to the point you're going to lose some battles.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with you overall. I thought he played well. I had him down for only giving up one pressure the whole game. And it was that early one where he had a guy and then the guy just kind of chucked him inside. He lost his balance and the guy beat him around the outside.
Mm-hmm. The third point that we had, Brian, was early down success is crucial, which in turn will lead to third down success, a common theme that what we've been talking about here in the postseason. So, Brian, where are you headed with this one, man?
I got to give him a minus because of the inability to execute in those situations. First drive of the game, it was great. You come out second drive, first down, you have a miss. You had two opportunities for a good play. You could have taken a slot fade. That would have required a really nice ball, but he was open. If you don't like it, throw the cross. You got 5 to 6 yards and you're in a good place. And you fail to do that. You come out the next drive, you have a nice 5-yard gain on first down. Then on second down, you give up the run through on the middle linebacker. Now, Riley did a great job of making that guy miss. Cody Simon came untouched, and Riley Leonard made him miss, which is, we've said to you all year, Notre Dame's pass pro is not as good as their sack numbers allowed would make you think, because there's not a lot of quarterbacks that are going to make Cody Simon. Cody Simon's a really good football player and a really good tackler, and Riley made him look like he's an amateur. He made him look like a MAC player on that particular play. And that's not a knock on Cody Simon because Riley Leonard's been doing that to people all year. That is a hard dude to bring down in space, and he made Cody whiff on that play. The pressure killed the play, though.
Yep.
But what I'm saying is that should have been a -7 instead of a 0. And he got outside the pocket and threw the ball away. But, it's one of those things where if you pick that up, he's got a little snag route to Eli Raridan for a first down. And it's those missed opportunities on first and second down. You come out to the third drive or the fourth drive. So third after the touchdown, 1st and 10, you got Jaden Greathouse open on a curl route, the one I showed earlier. That should be first down. There's nothing that Ohio State did in those first down situations that were like, ooh, good play by Ohio State. Nothing. It was you making mistakes. It was you just turning the guy loose. And that's where, it's got to be a minus because you missed on all those opportunities to kind of get drives going. And when you get behind the sticks against Ohio State, you're done. You're done. And it's amazing they even had some of the third down success they had, and it required Riley Leonard making great throws and receivers making big-time catches and running big-time routes to even get to that point. But, that's just kind of how it's going to be. It's a minus for me, Trev. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I'm with you. It's a minus, especially because of the performance of the first half. I know obviously football is 4 quarters, but look, when you have a first half as rough as outside of that first possession is what Notre Dame had, that's going to carry a lot of weight. And I think that's one thing that's really, really tough because The lack of early down success to me was a lot of it was just execution. A lot of it was execution. You know, you go to that second drive, first play, should have hit the slot fade to Jaden Greathouse because he was wide open. But I don't look early in the game like that. Like if you have the opportunity to take the dump off to Bo Collins, fine. I don't think those are going to be game-winning plays once you go down the stretch. But if you are going to take a dump-off route, then execute it, right? If you're going to sail a pass, I would have much preferred you sail the pass to Jaden Greathouse. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're going to take the slot fade to Jaden Greathouse and that's going to be your miss, fine. If your miss is sailing a 5-yard underneath crosser, it's the execution level has to be higher. So for me, it gets a minus as well because it's just the offense really didn't hit their stride until there was 7.5 minutes left in the third, and then at that point, you just have to, yeah.
First of all, she's such a diva. Every time Angela's out of town, and I want to leave the door open because I don't want them to just be locked away from me for a couple hours. You know, every time she comes down here and she's got to get her airtime. Every time. I love that girl. But outside of that, that's what makes this so frustrating, Trev, because the stuff that they were hitting in the second half was there in the first half.
Boy, was it.
It was there. And this is the same thing that happened against Penn State. And so that's one of those things that, Coach Denbrock's going to have to get in the lab this offseason and say, how do we handle our preparation from a standpoint of we make some more of those plays? You know what I mean? Like, and some of that's going to be play calling, because one of the things I like that they did on first down in the first drive is they ran a little swing screen to Jeremiah Love. Where was that? Run one more of those, and then Ohio State starts overplaying it, and then you come with a little inside tunnel screen off of that. That's that kind of counter setup stuff that we just don't see Notre Dame do enough. And that's something that I really hope that we see Coach Denbrock do more of next year. But, I mean, there's clearly some things that he can do better, and he'll tell you that, I think, because what I know of Mike Denbrock, he's a very competitive dude, and competitive guys are never happy with what they're doing. I mean, it's like, I got to do better, and they need to do better, and I got to make sure I do a better job of making sure that they play better. But that's the thing, Trev, is there was so much of the stuff that we saw hit in the second half. Like, well, that's because Ohio State changed their defense. No, not. I mean, maybe like one of the final drives, but like the slot fade on Jordan Hancock, that's the same exact play that he should have thrown on the first drive or second drive of the game. Same exact route. And he actually beat Jordan Hancock more on the second series that he didn't throw than he did on the touchdown. But that's the thing, is like, I wish, the one regret that I have about Riley Leonard this year, and I love that kid, and Notre Dame is not playing last night if Riley Leonard doesn't come to Notre Dame.
100%.
Right? So can we say this without it turning into like, oh, you're just bashing Riley? I love that kid, and he is a big reason why Notre Dame played for the national championship last night. Big reason. But the one regret that I'm going to have when I look back on his tenure is that we didn't see more of just that let it all hang out gunslinger in the pass game that he was at Duke, and that he was in the second half against Penn State, in the second half against Ohio State, and against Navy, against Army. We saw flashes of it. But if we could have seen more of that, where he just kind of had that, hey, man, I'm just going to let her rip and trust my guys in the first half of games. Penn State's not a competitive game, because they would have scored with them early, and then once the defense started getting stops in the second half, they'd have pulled away and whooped them. I don't know if they'd have beat Ohio State last night, because my whole thing is, I still think they lose the game if the offense does what they needed to do, because I don't think Ohio State calls the dogs off in a second. We got to be honest about that. Ohio State, once they went up 31-7, called the dogs off. Even when Notre Dame made it 31-15, Ohio State was basically like, we're taking time off the clock with their next drive. Like, can we be honest about that? I still don't think that Notre Dame would have won the game if the offense was playing early, unless the defense would have been able to make some adjustments we never saw them make. Right? Now, maybe that would have, but here's the thing, maybe some of that early success would have put a little bit more pressure on Will Howard and the offense to, boy, we got to go make a play now, because Notre Dame keeps answering our scores with scores. And because they got the ball first, we're kind of keep playing catch. Maybe that would have led to him maybe making a mistake that he didn't make when they're up 14-7 and 21-7 and 28-7. So you don't really know, but I have to be honest about what we do know, and that's what we do know is Ohio State up 31-7 called the dogs off. And Notre Dame made it pay for it, right? I mean, because they're a 3rd and 11 stop away from getting that flipping ball back with a chance to go down and tie the ball game up. But the point is, we just never saw that from Riley. And there's a lot of reasons why, missed time, and I get all that. But I just wish that version of Riley that we saw in the second half against Penn State and we saw last night, I mean, for a kid that rarely threw the ball down the field in the regular season, he was pretty darn good throwing the ball down the field in the playoffs. I mean, 90% of his really impressive downfield throws were in the postseason against Indiana, against Penn State, and against Ohio State. And so the opportunity, the tools are there. He waited too late to kind of let her rip. And as I'm going to show in these videos the next couple of days on the board, there was stuff there. There was stuff there early, and they just couldn't hit it. I was impressed with how much they were getting open against Ohio State last night. I was impressed with how much movement they were getting up front against the Ohio State defense last night.
Yeah.
They just kept shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah. The wide receiver group showed me something last night.
Yeah.
They really did. And it was across the board. Like, it wasn't just Jaden Greathouse, right? Which leaves a lot of room for optimism. Eli Raridan, in the small little spurts that he was getting receptions, like, he also showed me a little bit of something too. You know, I mean, I know we're going to start previewing next year, you know, in the coming weeks, but he showed me a little bit of something as well. So that was promising, but I'm with you.
Who?
Eli Raridan.
Yeah. I agree.
The fourth key that we had on offense, and these last two we've kind of touched on a little bit, but as far as as far as your grades go, take advantage of big play opportunities.
I go check overall.
Yep.
Because if they don't take advantage of it in the second half, this is a 42. This looks like the 2012 playoff game. So, like, people say, oh, this is like 2012. No, it wasn't. It was on the way there, but then they stepped up and made some plays. You know, Jaden Greathouse with the catch and run. And this is why I say it's the operation that leads to things like that. It was Jagasol stoning JT on an again, initial good rush by JT, got up under Charles's pads, looked like he was going to drive him right into Riley Leonard, and then he plants, stones him. Riley feels comfortable, gets a nice ball off, perfect gut shot with Greathouse working in. He makes Jermaine Matthews. He beats Jermaine Matthews, and then puts a ridiculous move on Caleb Downs. And you had nice downfield block. Was that Bo or was that Chris Mitchell on that play?
I think that was Bo.
Bo had some really nice blocks, by the way, down the field yesterday.
Yeah, he did.
I couldn't remember if it was Bo or Chris Mitchell, but had a really nice downfield block that allowed Jaden Greathouse to get a free release. You know, you get the big play to Mitchell Evans down the middle of the field. You have the 30-yard touchdown to Jaden Greathouse. You have the big third down play where he beats, was it Hank? No, he beat Cody Simon on the deep over route, which is a matchup I wish they would have tried to take better advantage of. I mean, there's just nothing Cody Simon. He actually had pretty decent coverage. Riley did a great job of throwing the ball out, and then Jaden did a great job of getting to the football and beating him. I mean, shouldn't say he had a really good coverage. He had about as good as coverage as a linebacker is going to have against Jaden Greathouse on that type of route. But, you know, you hit some big plays in the second half, and the frustration was it was there. It was there. That stuff was there. I mean, Chris Mitchell should have had 5 catches for 65 yards in this game, you know, and setting up. And then all of a sudden you hit a couple of those, and all of a sudden you run that, you know, like here's what happens. You bang about 3 of those curl routes, and all of a sudden they start trying to play it, and now you hit them with a little out and up, you know, on it, or a stutter go on it, you know, because you could either hit the out and up where the corner drives on the curl and your slide route turns into a little wheel route and you pump fake and get that ball deep, or you can come down with a little stutter, boom, he drives on me because he knows curl's coming, and then I run by him. You know, I mean, there's different things you can do if you hit a couple of those. But, I mean, they could have got more. They should have got more early. But they definitely hit some of those big ones late, and that's what allowed them to get back in the game and make it a much more competitive game. Because, like, look, you can't say that Ohio State played the same way the whole game and Notre Dame just played better and came back. You can't say that. Because Ohio State's play calling was not the same in the second half as it was in the first half after they went up 31-7. So you're just not being honest with yourself. But you also can't say that Notre Dame didn't have opportunities to win it in the second half either. Like, both of those things are true. Yes, Ohio State called off the dogs, But yes, Notre Dame also made them pay for it, and they make a stop here, block a field goal, whatever. Now all of a sudden they've got the ball with a chance to tie, right? And it's because you started ripping off some of those big plays, because there were times when they didn't have a lot of urgency. It's just Greathouse was like, because I think I texted you, I'm like, dude, there's no urgency right now on this drive. And then Riley's like, okay, I'll show you urgency. Bomb, touchdown to Greathouse. You know what I mean? It was like literally like a play or two later.
I think it was a play later.
They were just kind of letting a little bit too much go. But I think with Denbrock, it's like we need to go play some pace, but let's make sure we get the right call in, because if we could run 5 plays really, really fast, or we can go 1 for 6, meaning 6 points. I think that's kind of what they did. So I think both of those things were true. Ohio State called off the dogs. Notre Dame made them pay for it. But because you didn't do what you needed to do early, I still got to say minus, because you had too many missed opportunities. You can't miss those opportunities against a team like Ohio State.
Absolutely. I will say, and I think you're meaning this too, but I think they called off the dogs more on offense than what they did on defense. I think defensively, I think they ran.
Offensively, I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I figured we're on the same.
Just offense.
The last key that we had, Brian, was Riley Leonard must play well. And where are you at with this one?
I give him a check. I mean, yeah, there were some of those missed opportunities, but he's the reason you scored your first touchdown. Mm-hmm. He threw some absolute dimes in the second half. Now, Jaden Greathouse got my game ball because he put that team on his shoulders. But Riley had to get him the ball, and he got him the ball. So I give him a check there. I mean, I think Riley played his butt off. Yeah, there's things that you critique. That's what this kind of show is. This show's always, even after a win, an overly critical show, because it's meant to be. We dive into the film, some things maybe we didn't talk about last night, things like that. But, I mean, overall, you were in that game because of Riley Leonard. Yes, some of the mistakes he made were why you fell behind, but it wasn't just him. There was plenty of that. But when he figured it out, Ohio State had no answers for him, none. And he gave you, I mean, the perfect way for Riley Leonard's career to go out would have been to win the football game, right? Obviously. But short of that, you're just watching that kid give you every little ounce of anything. I mean, he can't get up off the ground without just looking like he just broke something last night. I mean, that kid had nothing left. He was tapped out, but he still kept making play after play after play. And you're just like, boy, this kid is, for all the complaining some people did, we're going to miss that kid just because he was fun to watch. I'm excited about what the quarterback room is going to look like in the future. But my excitement isn't about, I'm glad Riley's gone. No, I loved watching that kid. Now he is gone. Now let's focus on the future quarterbacks. But he gave you everything he could have last night. And he's a big reason why you made that comeback the way that you did. And now that game looked a lot more respectable than it was looking for the first. Well, should say the middle, second quarter and then early third quarter, when Ohio State was dominating Notre Dame.
Riley Leonard had the best postseason play of a quarterback that I've seen in my lifetime, being in Notre Dame.
For Notre Dame?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're right, man. If Notre Dame was going to lose this game, which they did, but in years past, it was Book has to play better. Hartman has to play better. So-and-so has to play better. Cone has to, you know what I mean? Those were a lot of
big game game situation. Because we saw Ian play well against Iowa State in 19, and we saw Angeli play well against Oregon State last year. And that's not to take anything away from those kids, but
sure,
we're talking about in those big games, the quarterbacks have to play well.
Yep. Everett in the 2012 Natty.
Right.
And things
Although
like that.
I actually thought Everett played relatively well. He's going to get a lot of help in that game.
Yeah.
But he's a redshirt. I mean, Tommy again in the pinstripe bowl. It's who cares? I thought Ian played pretty well off the bench in 17 against LSU.
Yeah.
I thought that Malik and Everett both played really well in 14 against LSU as a duo. They did some really good things. Everett made some big time throws in that game. And then Malik just ran all over LSU in that game as well. But that's not the same as the 2018 Cotton Bowl or the 2020 Rose Bowl, right, or the 2024 first round playoff game, or the 2024 Sugar Bowl or Orange Bowl, where Riley, for stretches of all those games, just kind of put the team on his shoulder and was like, I gotcha. And he did it again last night.
Yeah. Yep. Sure did. Well, that's going to do it for the offensive keys to victory revisited, guys. But we still have the defense to get to. We still have some more film breakdowns to discuss. But before we get to all of that, make sure that you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and share this podcast. Whatever platform you guys watch this on, whether it be on Spotify podcasts or Apple Podcasts, be sure to leave us a 5-star review on whichever platform you choose to listen to Irish Breakdown. And be sure to subscribe to our premium message boards at boards@irishbreakdown.com. There's a lot of good conversation going on over there. Brian already talked about the film breakdowns that are going to be up there. It just helps really paint the picture, and it puts into context the things that we were talking about in this show and things that we're going to be talking about moving forward. So you can find all of that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, defense. And similar to the offensive side, we had 5 keys to victory on defense. And I have a feeling that we're going to be on the same page on all 5 of these. But we're going to rattle them off, and we're going to talk through where we are at and why we graded them the way that we did. And the first one that we had, was shut down the run game. So, Brian.
Minus.
Yep.
I mean, and there's a lot of reasons for it, Trev. Let's just kind of dive into it. Number one is the defensive line got whipped. I mean, they got whipped last night. I mean, there's no two ways about it. They got whipped. There's a play here, play there, but they played really poorly. The linebackers played poorly. Now, I put that more on coaching than I do the linebackers, because they were not allowed to play their game, which is a downhill, aggressive, attacking style of play. They weren't allowed to play that last night, Trev. Tackling was bad, and the game plan was bad. Like, there was a play, Trev, where Ohio State had trips left, but like a trips left wing, meaning like the tight end was like in a wing position. The running back was to the trip side, and then you had Will Howard. And Notre Dame bumped down to an odd front where they kicked Bryant Young, or was it Bryce Young, or was it RJ Oben? It was one of those two. Bumps inside in like a 5 technique, so the tight end's got like an easy block and leverage. They have a nose and then a 4-eye, and then Junior's now playing outside to the open side where the running back and the tight end are both opposite him. And then they just run power right at it. And you're just like, that's about as easy of a look for power as you're ever going to have. I don't know what the players are supposed to do against that, because you've put them in a bad situation to make that play. And so there was a lot of that stuff where, like, you're slanting into looks. You're like, why are you slanting there the way Ohio State runs? Like, their tendency is to run zone here, and you're just giving them the cutback lane. There was so much of that last night that just didn't make sense. And then on top of the execution, which wasn't good, some of the stuff, you're just not putting them in a good position to be successful. So there were some coaching issues I had last night, but I don't know what to tell the coaching staff when Howard Cross gets driven off the ball about 15 feet to the right and then planted. That wasn't part of the play call, So it was your D-line got whipped for the most part, and I still don't understand what the plan was as far as schematically, like alignment wise, not schematically. Just alignment wise, what you're doing in some of those looks, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. They were like giving them, and then there were some mistakes that were made, not setting the edge effectively, getting reached as a viper, and some stuff like that. And then of course the quarterback scrambles were just inexcusable. Like, there was one play where they dropped 8 and slanted the 3 down linemen to the boundary. What? They had trips left. They slanted 3 guys to the boundary, dropped Junior into coverage, and there's nobody to the field. And they're playing, it look like man, because they're just all running. And Will Howard just runs about the easiest 13, 14-yard gain ever. You're just like, there's no way that was the call. There's no way that was the call. That had to be some kind of problem check. You don't slant 3 guys on a first down play to the boundary, drop a viper, and have no one to account for the quarterback. It's like, there was so much stuff that like that where you're just like, I mean, yeah, Will Howard played a nice game last night, but like I could have literally gained 10 yards on that play. Like right now, not even like when I was in shape and 185 pounds and ran a 4.6. I'm like, right now, I could have gained at least 6 or 7 yards on that play. How about that? I mean, it was wide open. And you're just like, bro, I don't know what's going on right now. And somebody just asked, Berkshire Yank just asked a question, why so many breakdowns 16 games in? Goes back to the original thing that Trev and I talked about last night today. You were asking them to do things that they had not been doing for much of the season. And when you put things in, and even with extra time to prepare, and you go away from who you've been, you're going to make those kind of mistakes. When you're asking them to play a lot of zone, and they're not a team that plays a lot of that type of zone. When you're asking Jack Kaiser to undercut an over route by Emeka Egbuka, when he's been doing that hardly at all this season, he's going to get beat by Emeka Egbuka. You know, it's stuff like that that led to that. So part of it was you got whipped up front. You didn't let your linebackers be aggressive. You had some stuff schematically that just put you in some really rough spots, and it was a recipe for disaster. Now, there was about 3 big runs that Ohio State had last night that led to a lot of their yards, and then the quarterback scrambles. I mean, there was a lot of stuffs last night as well of the run game. But those mistakes that you made are why they gashed you. Because you make a mistake like that against Quinshon and Travion and Will Howard, they're going to make you pay for it. Just like the Notre Dame running backs and quarterback will make you pay for it. It's just Ohio State's didn't do that, and Notre Dame's did. And that's the issue.
I said it last night in the postgame. It was evident watching the game live, and even more evident when I turned on the film when it got sent over to me. Notre Dame's players were extremely uncomfortable with the things that they were being asked to do in that game. To answer your question, Berkshire, because, look, the things that were happening on the field were uncharacteristic. The play calls that were being called in were uncharacteristic. What they were asking their players to do didn't even go to their strengths. We talked about it last night. Christian Gray, look, there's a lot. There's a lot to unpack there. But as far as shutting down the run game, this one's a minus for me. And look, guys, like I'm still frustrated from last night. And honestly, I got even more so after watching some of the film. All of our keys on defense are a minus for me. And I don't really think that there's going to be a whole lot of debate there with what they are. But as far as shutting down the run, it was just, it wasn't there. And what I had said in the week leading up to it is you can't let this turn into 2022 USC, where Caleb Williams was going to dance around and get his plays and do what he needed to. You just can't let USC's running backs gash you. And USC, that game, rushed for over 200 yards. And last night, Ohio State, their running backs, Quinshon, gashed Notre Dame's defense. They ended up with over 200 yards. We had said it all week, Brian. Ohio State's defense is really, really, really dangerous when they're balanced. And they had that for about 5 straight possessions when they rattled off 31 points. So run game for me is a minus. The second one is get after Howard all game.
Minus.
Yep.
And it's for the same exact reasons we just talked about. Your D-line got whipped. And Josh Burnham had a couple wins. Bryce Young had a couple decent wins. You got some good linebacker pressures in the second half. But your D-line didn't play very well. Your interior gave you very little pass rush. I think Heinisch had a win or two. I think Rubio had one. Howard Cross. I'm saying this with the caveat that the kid is clearly, I don't want this to come across like I'm banging on Howard Cross. Kid's playing honestly, shouldn't be playing the number of snaps he's playing with where he is health-wise. But he's giving you everything he's got. This isn't the Howard Cross we saw before the injury, and he didn't give you much. But then you didn't let your linebackers attack early in the game either. So the things that led to you not being good stopped. Because what did I say before the game? And I've said this before. When you're aggressive attacking the run, that stuff leads to then the pressures in the pass game because those run stunts turn into blitzes because you attack your gap, you see it's passed, you keep working to the quarterback. Or what they've done in the past is you then stay in your gap to where now you collapse the pocket and there's nowhere for the quarterback to go. So he's got to throw into your coverage, but he can't take off running. And they did none of that last night. And so it's a minus for me. They rushed for over 200 yards, and Will Howard didn't throw an incomplete pass till the third quarter? Late second quarter?
Late second quarter, I think. He started the game 13 of 13.
Yeah.
That tells you all you need to know.
How do I not give a minus there?
Right.
Somebody make a case of why I shouldn't be giving a minus right now. Oh, guys are just haters. Whatever. What do you want me to do? You're telling me that Oregon and Tennessee and Texas all have better defenses than Notre Dame? Because I don't think he was quite that good against them. So, yeah, it's a minus. Definitely a minus.
Same for me as well. It's going to be a common thing for me on the defensive side of the ball. I'm just calling a spade what it is. The third point for the defense was limit big plays, Brian. And, yeah, I mean – this one's tough. So this one's interesting because I'm still giving this a minus. The 70-yard touchdown run was bad, and that was just bad from an execution standpoint. You said it earlier. I didn't hate the play call there. It's just lapse in execution. But Ohio State didn't have the big chunk plays that they had against Tennessee and that they had against Oregon in the Rose Bowl. No. But it's just what killed them was the big plays for them was the level of consistency. They were getting 12 to 18
19
yards.
I think they had back-to-back plays in the first drive of 19 and 15.
Yeah.
Right? You had a 19-yard run of a cutback of Quinshawn or of Travion, then you run a little now screen outside. Kaiser misses a tackle and he goes for 15. Mm-hmm. They were getting those good chunk plays. The first play call was exceptional for the touchdown. I mean, so what happened on that play is I was able to go back and watch the all 22. Christian knew based on pre-game scouting that based on that alignment, Jeremiah Smith was going to basically go across at the snap. And that's what he was yelling at. I don't know what he was expecting other people to do. That I can't tell. But when he started running across, he was not covering Emeka. He was chasing Jeremiah across. And then he looked back and realized Jeremiah didn't keep coming. So he lost Jeremiah when he took off running. And it's because he's looking to see what's in front of me. He doesn't want to get picked. And he's thinking, once I clear, I'm going to then find Jeremiah and play him. It's a great play call.
Spectacular.
And Christian's got to have more awareness there. But sometimes you just got to tip your cap and say, it's a great play call. I mean, they literally knew their own tendency. They knew that Notre Dame would know that tendency. Christian Gray is losing his mind trying to point out that they saw it coming, and he was right that that's what they did. And then Ohio State used that against Notre Dame. I've said, how many times have you heard me say Notre Dame's offense needs to do more of that over the years? You got to know your own tendencies and use those against other teams. Mike Denbrock's probably been the best at that, but even then, it's you need to see more of it. Tommy was good at that at times. When Tommy was really in his bag, he was good at that. But, Chip Kelly did a phenomenal job with that stuff last night, especially on that particular touchdown.
That play was spectacular.
Yeah. But so it was kind of you were kind of okay with the big plays in the first half. Then the second half, you have the 70-yard run that puts the game away. And then, of course, that puts big separation between the two of you.
Yeah.
And then you have the big bomb at the end of the game when that's your chance to win it right there. Is you got to make that play there. And that was another example of it's actually worse than I thought because they had shown that same exact coverage for an entire quarter. They didn't disguise a thing. They had been doing that the whole quarter. Whenever they'd get Jeremiah backside like that, they'd have Christian play off man. And Jeremiah ran by him earlier. Christian did a little bit better job of it earlier. But on that one, it's just he knew he was getting the ball, and he ran a great route, and there was no safety help. They had shown that, I think, at least 5 or 6 times in the second half. And Ohio State was just waiting on their chance to go to it. And they did there. And that was a bad decision. Bad decision.
Yeah. Yeah, sure was.
You don't put that in that. You don't go ahead, Trev.
No, I was going to ask you something because I'll have to go back and watch the film. Definitely something that I could have answered myself by going back and checking this out. I just spur of the moment. I didn't know if you remembered offhand. Was Christian in off coverage against Arian Smith when Arian Smith had that 62-yarder as well?
It was the same thing. He stemmed him up, he froze him, and then he beat him outside. Yeah, he was off coverage then too.
So that's even more frustrating. It's look, Christian Gray's strength is not playing off man. And you put him in that scenario with the game on the line against one of, if not the best receiver in college football. You got to be better there. And I don't know who that is. I don't know if that's Golden. I don't know if that's who called the defense. I don't know if that's Mickens. I don't know who it is, but whoever that was, maybe it's a collective effort.
I mean, that's the play call. That's the defensive coordinator making that call.
Got to be better.
Yeah.
It's got to be better. What were you about to say? I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say like that. That's one of those things where, we talked earlier about not putting your players in position to be successful. Not even if Christian Gray wasn't bad at off coverage. You're putting him in that situation where not only are you putting him in off coverage, but you're then having him playing inside alignment, which they've done all game, in hopes of protecting the post. But they had kind of shown you that they're a willingness to run a go route before in that game. They just didn't throw the ball there. One time Will Howard got pressured. Another time he just looked left and ended up, I think, scrambling or throwing the ball. But they knew they had that. On that play, he literally just took 2-step, 3-step, hit it, and just let her rip. I mean, they weren't going to get to him fast enough. He was shotgun. He did a quick drop and just let it rip and just launched it as far as he could throw because there was no read. As soon as he saw, he catches the ball and he sees Xavier Watts playing the slot and it's gone. He's throwing that ball. And the thing is, in that situation, even if Christian Gray's in hip-to-hip coverage, the way he threw that ball, it's going to be up in the air and Jeremiah's going to go get it. You're not stopping him on that play with one guy. That was unfair to ask. If you can hate on Christian Gray all you want, I think some of the stuff on him is silly. It's like almost like Troy Pride 2019. Yeah, Christian's had some big mistakes this year. He's also made a lot of big-time plays this season and it's been really good. But you only see on TV when he gets beat and when he makes a pick. You don't see all the snaps in between where he played good coverage. You don't put him in that situation. You don't. And that's as much of a coaching problem from Al Golden as it was, because you showed the same coverage you've been showing him all game in that situation. That's one of those times where you show something and then roll into something else, where you show heavy blitz, you drop your safety, you smoke a couple linebackers because they're in that situation. I feel like Notre Dame thought they were going to run the ball on 3rd and 11. I think they were playing that. And if you look at where the safety was and how they came down, I think Notre Dame thought they were just going to run the ball and punt.
I think so too.
And I think if you feel that way, you don't know Chip Kelly really well. So you got to do a better job there.
Yeah.
No, you got to do a better job there.
The last thing that I'm going to add to, I could not agree with you any more about Christian Gray, but you don't put anybody in that situation, regardless.
You don't put Leonard Moore in that situation.
You don't put Leonard Moore in that situation. You don't put Ben Morrison.
Maybe Benjamin, just because he's your more pure cover guy.
Sure.
And he plays the ball so well. But he's also a junior who's played a ton of football and has gone up against guys like Jeremiah Smith before.
Sure.
Christian hasn't.
Yeah.
He didn't go against Marvin Harrison for 2 years. He didn't go against Jordan Addison the way Benjamin, has.
Yeah.
So maybe Benjamin. But even then, it's like, I don't know. I would have put Benjamin on the backside if he was there. I'd have put him on one-on-one and the other guy, and then still had Christian on Jeremiah Smith, and then just giving him help over the top.
Yep.
And then have your best corner locked down one-on-one backside, and then double team. You don't double team with your best corner. I've never liked that. You double team with your other corner and then have, I'm a big believer. And that's why I like playing field and boundary, because I'm going to put my stud in the boundary and just let him cover all day. And then I can use my safeties to help over the middle and then help with my field guy.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they should have done in that situation, but they didn't. And they put Christian Gray in a bad spot, and then Christian didn't play it well either. So I'm not like, Christian played it as well as he could. No, Christian bit too hard on the inside. My thing with him there, and this is that young guy mistake is, and he'd made the same mistake against Georgia, and he's going to have to learn this in the offseason, is when your leverage is taking away something, you don't need to overplay that move. But Jeremiah Smith did it exactly how I taught it. I actually tweeted it out today. Y'all will hear me say things when I'm talking about receiver play where I'll say, attack the corner's leverage and your aiming point's the outside shoulder. Because when he's trying to take something away, a lot of corners will make the same mistake that Christian did, which is their alignment is taking that away. A veteran corner is going to know I don't need to overreact to that because my leverage is protecting that. I need to protect that, the inside of my leverage, and then aggressively take the outbreaking stuff, right? younger corners tend to get in their mind, I'm playing inside because I can't let him get inside. I can't. So then when he gives you that inside move, you really play it. But Jeremiah attacked his leverage, but he never got to his numbers. If you go look at it, he stayed right here on that outside shoulder. So attacked his leverage, aiming point outside shoulder. So his inside shoulder to Christian's outside shoulder, which squeezed Christian down. And as soon as he got him to sink down, he popped it back out. That's receiver 101. Great job by Brian Hartline and Jeremiah Smith on executing that good technique-wise. Christian didn't execute it with the kind of technique. But at the end of the day, he should have never been in that situation to begin with. You should have given him safety help. We knew where the ball was going. I mean, we're talking about it before the snap about we know where the ball's going. They're taking a shot to 4. And you're going to make someone else beat you. If Cardinal Tate beats you on 3rd and 11 and you tip your cap to Ohio State and say, that's why you're going to be the champs. You can never allow a kid like that to beat you in that situation. And that's why I say, like, yeah, Christian's got to play that better. Christian will tell you, I got to play that better. He'll tell you that because he's a competitive kid and he's a great kid. Yeah. But you also need to be able to look in the mirror and say, like, Fran Brown did that against Stanford. Fran Brown, remember that late bomb that they threw to Ellick Manor against Clarence Lewis? Yeah. And they beat him. And Fran Brown after the game said, that's not on Clarence. That's on us. We should not. I mean, we knew where the ball's going. We should have given him help. We should not have put him on an island like that. And he wasn't ripping Clarence. That dude does that to a lot of people not named Benjamin Morrison. You don't put your corner in that situation. And I respect the heck out of that from Fran Brown. When he owned that after that game, he's like, no, that's not on him. That's on us. We left that kid basically hanging out to dry. And I hope that Al Golden has that same feeling of that's on us, not you. Yep. I really do. 100%. That's what good coaches do. And I think Al Golden's a heck of a football coach. Yeah. And I'll bet you if he's the guy that I think he is, Al Golden's torn up inside over that call. That's what good coaches do, especially good coaches that care about their kids. Yeah. And two things that I know to be true about Al Golden, and I don't know what his future holds. I don't think he's going to be back next year. But two things I know to 100% to be true about Al Golden, he's competitive and he loves those kids. Yeah, he does. There's no doubt in my mind. I bet you it's eating him up inside that he put them in that position because I like Al Golden. I respect Al Golden. Mm-hmm. And you know, again, and I know everything it's not official yet, so just let it play out. But as we said last night, we know what we think is going to happen. So just relax and let it play out. But you know, I bet you if he's the guy that I think he is, he's not happy about that. He's not.
The fourth key that we had on defense, Brian, was dominate on 3rd down. And I have to go back and check the box score, but I
had it down. I think it was 9 of 12, but I had it written down. They were 8 of 9 when it was 31-7. 8 of 9 on and Trev, they weren't converting a lot of 3rd and 2s. I mean, that's the frustrating part about it. Is let's look at the box score here, Trev. This is the Ohio State game last night. Okay, so let's go through. I obviously it does. They converted a 3rd and 5, a 3rd and 3. It's a short one, and on the first drive, second drive a 3rd and 5, 3rd and 2, third touchdown drive a 3rd and 7, a 3rd and 7, third quarter, 3rd and goal from the 3, or from the 1, and then. Let's see here. First time you stopped them on 3rd down, it's because it was 3rd and 16. That's the first time you stopped them on 3rd down. So 3rd and 16. I mean, you were not exactly in situations where they were converting a bunch of 3rd and 1s. They were converting 3rd and 5s and 3rd and 7s on you like it was nothing. And they were easy conversions.
And they were getting significantly more than what they needed to convert it. Like, it's not like it was 3rd and 5 and they got 6. It was 3rd and 5 and they got 12.
Right.
Like that.
Well, here's what it was, right? So your first drive, you get 3rd and 5 and you get 7. Now, that's the one that was a push off on Jeremiah Smith against Leonard Moore. That should have been called. I mean, you got your separation because you shoved him. Mm-hmm. That should have been called. And, you know, it wasn't. It is what it is. But then after that, let's see here. So that's your first drive. Your 3rd and 3, you got 5. Then you get to your next drive is when it really got going. 3rd and 5, you got 11. You get to your next drive, 3rd and 7, you got 19, 3rd and 7, you got 20. Like that's what you were talking about, Trev, is like that you weren't just getting those easy ones, like you were getting well past what you thought you were going to get on those plays.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been
100%.
3rd and 19 and they would have converted it on that
Both
same
of them.
play. I mean, yeah, I mean, this one for me, especially after going through and watching it, this is as close of giving a double minus as that. Like, not. I mean,
again, you got to play who you are. Notre Dame's been great on 3rd down all year. They were terrible on 3rd down last night. And why? Because you weren't playing what you normally do on 3rd down. You weren't playing your game, and that's how you get beat. And they got whipped on 3rd down. Whipped.
The final one that we had, Brian, was field goals, not touchdowns. And they forced 2 field goals in the second half. You go down 28-7. And you scored 4 touchdowns on 4 consecutive drives.
Yeah.
So my grade's minus. So
I mean, it's imagine if, first drive of the game, they get down and it's 3rd and 3 at the 18-yard line. You make a stop there and they're kicking a field goal, right? You don't. You get your next drive, 3rd and 5. Will Howard runs for 11, easy run for 11. Then they get down to 3rd and 2 from the 12, and Will Howard runs again for 3. I mean, you had 2 chances there. One of those stops gets you off the field completely. The second stop forces a field goal. Okay, so you're now down 14-7 instead of 10-7. And then the next drive, you get a 3rd and 7 early in the drive, and Brandon Ennis gets 19. They were deep in their own territory, and you get a 3rd and 7 still in their own territory. They get 20, and then they don't face another 3rd down on that drive. You couldn't make stops, and next series you go out and you give up a 70-yard run, and you get them down to 3rd down at the 1, but then you can't stop them, and they score a touchdown there, and it's 28-7 instead of 20 to. I mean, even if they score there, it's 20-7 because you held them to 3rd downs, field goals. You had 2 red zone 3rd downs on their first 2 drives, and they converted both of them. You hold them on those plays, it's now 13-7 at halftime instead of 21-7 at halftime. And it's now 20-7 after that 70-yard touchdown run. And then what the score that they got 3 plays later instead of 28-7. Well, now the game looks a whole lot different when Jaden Greathouse, and then they got a field goal after that, right? So then let's say it's 23-7. And now all of a sudden Jaden Greathouse gets that touchdown and you go for 2 and get it. Now all of a sudden it's a 1-score game just like that. Middle of the 3rd quarter, 1-score game. And now you've got, so that's the thing is like, yeah, you're going to give up drives, but you're one of the best red zone defenses in college football, and they're one of the best red zone offenses in college football. They dominated you. They dominated you in that regard. Because their first field goal was not a red zone drive. They never got into the red zone on that first field goal. This last field goal, the only reason they didn't score a touchdown is because they weren't going to risk a pick there. With it being a 1-score game, they weren't going to take any chance of dropping back and something happening. And you give them a play there and you don't get points. They were going to run the ball, and if one pops, it pops. But wisely, they weren't going to take a chance of Will Howard dropping back, because it just weren't smart coaching. They weren't going to do that. Take your field goal. You got a pretty clutch, not clutch, but you got a pretty consistent field goal kicker from that range. Take the points in the ball game. That's the only time you held them to a field goal. Now, what I love about this team is those Notre Dame kids, the pads were popping on those final 3 plays. There was no give up on that. They stopped them. They stopped them, but Ohio State wasn't running their normal red zone offense there. We can admit both of those things. Those kids played their butts off, and Ohio State wasn't running the red zone offense they ran earlier in the game, right? And so your red zone defense was terrible. They scored anytime they wanted to.
You want to talk about how much it means when you turn touchdowns into field goals. The prime example is Texas in the SEC championship game. That's what that means, right? 9 points is a heck of a lot different than 21, and so it's frustrating. That's the situational football that we talked about, Brian, winning in those key moments of if they get into the red zone, you have to force field goals. When you have an opportunity to get a turnover, you have to capitalize. If you get them into 3rd and long, and I count 3rd and long anything like 3rd and 6 or above, You know, like that to me is third medium, third and long, third medium long. And I mean, not only did they execute, they excelled. And I mean, yeah.
Some of the stuff is like Rod Hurd's got to do a better job of playing Brandon Ennis, but that was also a good play call.
Oh yeah.
You know, and then like the play where the Jeremiah Smith play call for the touchdown. That was a great play call. You got to play that better, but that's a great play call. Finding Quinshon, you can't turn Quinshon Judkins loose like that on that touchdown. You just can't do that. You can't turn guys loose. But some of that stuff was also you got to be like, look, that's a really good play call, and they just outcoached you in that regard. It wasn't all Notre Dame making mistakes.
Right.
Some of the stuff was like, dude, that was a great play call, or that was great execution, or that was, some of the stuff was mistakes by Notre Dame. Some of that stuff was like, they got Brandon Ennis, who's a dude who'd start for a lot of teams, including, in the country, including the playoff teams, is your number 4 receiver. You got him matched up against Rod Hurd. That's a great spot to be in, and they designed around. I mean, he was the guy that they were trying to get the ball to there.
Yeah.
They used the other guys as decoys. That's great play calling.
Yeah, it is.
You got to play it better. Rod's got to play it better. But that's also, sometimes you got to say, hey, you got to do a better job here. But as an analyst, if you're a coach, you're coaching Rod Hurd up on how he's got to play that better. But as an analyst on our end, we're just like, heck of a play call. And then, of course, Notre Dame got no pressure. And so it was a lot easier in that regard. But, it's a lot easier to bang a 20-yard in cut to Cardinal Tate when there's nobody in your face and you're not getting pressure. So, but you still had to make the call and you still had to make the throw, and Cardinal made the catch. But, it came down to where the things that had gotten you here, you didn't do. And you're not going to beat a team like Ohio State if you're not playing your game. And part of that was Ohio State, and part of that was you. They both factored into it, and that's why Notre Dame got an L. And again, they battled their butts off. I'm not taking anything away from the heart of this football team, man. I have so much admiration for these young men on this team, and I have so much admiration for what this coaching staff did to get this team here.
100%.
Like, yeah, we're being real critical of them tonight because we're grown-ups and we can do that. And I promise you, if they're champions, we're not being nearly as critical on them as they're being on themselves, right? It's okay to point out that they did not do some good things last night, but you can still then appreciate all the great things they did to get here. Player and like, they're not playing this game in spite of coaching. They're not playing in this game in spite of talent. They're here because of those things. But just last night wasn't their night. They didn't coach overly great on defense. They didn't execute overly great on either side of the ball. It's life. That's why they got beat. But that doesn't mean that we're sitting there saying, you guys suck. And no, they didn't do well last night. Al Golden's a phenomenal coach. Last night, what is the night? Chip Kelly got him. Al Golden's outcoached some pretty darn good offensive coaches. He got after Jeff Brom a little bit back in September. That's football, man. That's football. I mean, and if you really break down the film, Mike Denbrock was getting after Jim Knowles a little bit last night too.
Sure
it's
was.
Just Ohio State's kids executed better in those situations where stuff was there, and Notre Dame's guys didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean they're not great kids. Doesn't mean they didn't try their butts off. Doesn't mean I love this football team. This is one of my most fun years I've ever had as a fan.
Oh,
right. Like, just love this team, the heart of this team, the character of this team. I'm watching both of these teams got kids just in their press conferences and doing things, just praising Jesus and going on press conferences, just praising Jesus and the impact that faith has had in their lives. And I'm like, man, these are some awesome kids. These are some great kids for both teams. And I loved following this Notre Dame team. There's so much character on this football team. There's so many kids you're like, dude, if I had the kind of business where I could afford a Notre Dame graduate, I would absolutely hire these kids. These are great young men. If they became coaches and I had a child, I'd be like, I'd love my child to play for those kids. I mean, they're first-class young men, and this coaching staff did a phenomenal job this year. But it's okay to be able to say, yeah, those things are all true, but last night was not one of those nights. And that's what it was for the defense. Doesn't take away from how good of a dang staff this is. But last night wasn't their night. It's okay. It's part of life.
Sure is. That's well said. Look, Brian, before we move on to kind of the rest of the portion of the show, like we did cover a lot. So What all do you want to cover on, like, say, the offensive side? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we got to a lot, Trev. I feel like we kind of covered it all. I
yeah,
do. I mean, again, it was one of those nights where you needed to play your game on both phases of the game. You need to have a good game plan going in. I think they did that on offense. They did not do that on defense. And you needed to execute that game plan at a high level. They did not do that on offense enough. Defense, they didn't either. I mean, again, we can blame Al Golden for certain things, but there's 7, 8, 9, 10 plays where just like, that's not coaching from the standpoint of, dude, that's not the right fit. You got to make that tackle. You can't play that in cut like that.
right.
I mean, like sometimes you got to say, hey, listen, man, I don't love that play call, but I'm pretty sure he wasn't asking that D tackle to get driven 15 feet that way and planted on the ground. Pretty sure that wasn't how Al Washington coaches it up or how Al Golden called it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's second. Game still in doubt, 2nd and 8. You get a pressure. RJ Oben beats Josh Fryer off the edge, gets a good pressure, forces an incompletion. It's about to be 3rd and 8. You make a stop there, dude. It's like, and he just shoves the guy. That's not on Al Golden. Al Washington should never have to tell a 6-year senior not to. You know that. And I'm not banging on RJ Oben. A kid gave you everything he had. He wasn't that good this year. But without him, I mean, who knows how the playoff goes? With that big play he had against Georgia, I'll always remember that. But you just can't make those kind of mistakes, man. You can't. Not in that moment. And there was too much of that. So, yes, in these shows, we tend to be very critical of those things because that's the whole point of the show. And our name is Irish Breakdown. Not Irish touchy feels and let's make sure everybody's happy. We're breaking this down. And this nature of this show is to be critical of what we saw. And we would have had stuff to be critical of even if Notre Dame would have come back and won at the end of the day.
Oh, yeah.
Although if they would have come back and won that game, I don't know that I'd have a voice to do a show tonight. We might still be on the postgame show right now. The postgame show might just now be wrapping up. If
I was about to say,
last night.
I had fully prepared myself that if Notre Dame won last night, I had bought like 2 additional energy drinks.
Yes, we might still be on the show.
Yeah, it would have been a long one. Worth it. Yeah, I mean, no, man, everything that you said is so spot on. The only other thing that I'll add to is like with the play calling thing has nothing to do with tackling. And the tackling was not good. Just wasn't.
Sort of. It can at times if you're taking bad angles because you're not in position.
Sure.
But there was a number of tackles last night where they were there.
Yeah.
Like I just want to be clear on that because I do think there's times when coaching can impact tackling, but that wasn't the case a lot last night. That was just, dude, you got to be better than that. Jack Kaiser not getting a Quinshon Junkins on the now screen, but you're a 6-year senior, dude. You know better.
Yeah, I mean, it was unfortunately it was the same in back-to-back games. The tackling against Penn State was also not great. Like I said in the post-game show last night, they had 25 missed tackles across 2 games. They had 4 against Georgia. And so, like, that's just stuff.
Now, again, part of that is playing some dudes.
Oh, yeah.
And we didn't think Georgia had – and this is the thing. You can beat Georgia throwing the ball for 90 yards, but you and I also both said you're not going to beat Penn State and Ohio State that way because they're not Georgia. They've got better offenses than Georgia. They're better players than Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
But it was what it was. But the thing that bothered me is you had D linemen missing tackles last night. I mean, Gabriel Rubio had 2 missed tackles. Like, you can't have that, man.
I know.
You're a D tackle. You get a chance to make a play like that. You can't miss. You can't make those misses, man. You can't. And that's the stuff that gets frustrating is like, you got to finish those plays off. They didn't finish last night. And that's why they came up short. But I do want to end with this, Trev, because this is kind of the final show about this team, purely about this team, is this was still, even after last night's disappointment, this was such a fun team to watch. And I feel the need to say that because, and I'm kind of joking. I mean, I was joking about this isn't like touchy-feely show. This is breakdown stuff. But this is kind of part of a breakdown is, we're critical of how they played last night because they did not play their game. But I still want to say this was such a fun team to cover. Just the type of young men this team has, the heart this team showed, the talent this team had, the coaching this team received. This notion that this Notre Dame team just I was on the show with an Ohio State reporter, and she was cool. I mean, she was friendly, but she's like, Notre Dame just finds ways to win. I mean, yeah, they find ways to win 49-14 and 52-3 and 51-14. And it's like, let's not act like Notre Dame's been like the miracle cardiac kids all year. You know what I mean? Like they won 14 games, 12 of them were by double digits. But that's just kind of that stigma that they got. This is a really, really dominant football team as well. And from the top down, yeah, I just feel like I want to put a bow on this season by saying this is, Marcus Freeman has answered the questions of, is he a top coach? He is. Yeah, he's got to show he can do what it takes to win a championship, but your football team is a reflection of your head coach and your leadership. And that's what this team became. And we questioned that leadership after week 2. And we said, who's going to step up as leaders? Who's going to be, where's the accountability? Well, we saw that. We saw that the rest of the year. And we saw leadership emerge at all levels. We saw guys like Riley Mills and Xavier Watts start to say, okay, I'm going to take some ownership of this thing and make sure that doesn't happen again on defense. We saw Drake Bowen emerge as a leader throughout the season. We saw Riley Leonard become more and more of a leader of that group. We saw Jeremiah Love become a star, and we saw this team overcome some left tackle. I mean, think about what are the 3 most important positions on an offense: quarterback, center, and left tackle, as far as just like hard to replace. Well, they lost 2 of those guys for the season. And then the other guy basically played with a hurt shoulder all year. Like, let's not forget, Riley Leonard's left shoulder did not miraculously heal in a week after the Northern Illinois game. He's been playing with that all year. And you have all the losses on defense, and they never flinched. They never said, we're not going to use that as an excuse. There was never any like, woe is us. Hey, Benjamin Morrison's down. Leonard, let's go. Let's do your thing. And he stepped up to the plate because that's just what this team is. Tremendous heart and tremendous coaching. But here's the deal, Trev. All that heart and all that coaching doesn't get you to the title game if you don't also have big-time talent. And this team also had big-time talent. Did Ohio State have more? Turned out they did. But this is a very talented football team. And the future is incredibly bright because Marcus Freeman has been building to this for a while. This wasn't some fluky season. This is the culture he's creating, and I can't wait to see what his 4th edition of his football team looks like. There's going to be some changes. Some players are going to leave, some for the NFL, some are going to go in the portal most likely. You're going to have coaches leave. That's what happens when you have the success Notre Dame has. You have to trust Coach Freeman to hire the right people and put the right people in place. And I think he's earned that from me to a degree. With the hires, I mean, some of the hires he's made that I wasn't fond of have turned out to be pretty decent hires. 2 great hires, some varying degrees. I didn't love the Joe Rudolph hire. He's done some good things. I'm going to have some things to talk about from Joe Rudolph, some improvements that need to be made from him. Didn't love the Al Golden hire. Had some, he hadn't been in college in a while. He hadn't been a coordinator since like 2005. Is this really going to work out? Boy, I really like the guy from Minnesota. I want Joe Rossi. I really liked, Doug Belk as a defensive coordinator. And there was other guys that I thought he should consider. I was a little skeptical of Al Golden hire. It's a freaking grand slam home run hire, dude. I mean, there's no other way around it. Yeah, last night wasn't great, but that doesn't anyone who's ever coached that says like, well, yeah, you're not great coaches shouldn't have nights like that is a liar. And as I told you, I've coached 7 years in college football, lower level, FCS, D3 football. And I had a lot of success, man. A lot of success. But there were times where I got circles coached around me. And sometimes I coach circles around other coaches. That's life. Just like sometimes you don't play great, sometimes you don't coach great. And last night he didn't coach great. But doesn't take away from the fact that was a phenomenal hire by Marcus Freeman. And I didn't love the Marty Biaggi hire. And there's things Coach Biaggi's got to do a better job of. But you know what? Special teams played a huge role in Notre Dame's success this season. And the big issue they had in special teams, I don't really blame him for. It's not your fault your kicker got hurt. And, you didn't have any. I mean, how many teams have 3 great kickers on their roster?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just that's life. But he did a lot of good things. And, really proud of of the way this team competed all year, but this is also a really talented football team, and I can't wait to see what addition 4. And, of course, Chad Bowden and with the talent acquisition and his crew is top-notch as well. So it was a really fun year. It didn't end the way we wanted it to. Obviously, there's a lot of criticism being lobbed by us at what led to that, and that's what we do here. It's Irish Breakdown. But it doesn't take away this team. This team had every reason to quit last night, Trev. Every reason to quit. 31-7, you're like, guys, it ain't our night. It's not our night. Let's just be respectable and not let them blow us out and get out of it. But that team literally kept playing like, no, we're not done yet. We're not done yet. We're not out of this thing yet. And we're in the chat. We're like, it's ball game. I think I text you guys ball game. And players weren't saying that. And that's what I love about this team. I mean, they literally fought until the very end. And they deserve a ton of praise for that.
Oh, yeah.
Just wasn't enough. And the ultimate goal at Notre Dame is to win a championship. So they fell short of that. But then the needle got moved big time this season.
Oh.
Big time.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it a lot in this postseason, but this has been my favorite year being a Notre Dame fan. And the further and further away I get from last night, the more and more I'm just reflecting back on. I mean, you look at the grand scheme of the season and the things that this team has accomplished. It's stuff that I hadn't seen in my lifetime. I'm not going to let a bad night ruin the first 15 games. And I'm including the Northern Illinois game in that because we said it before. Without that loss, I don't know if the team makes it this far.
Yeah.
It's the thing that I love so much about the comeback last night was the mark of a good team is being able to battle through adversity. You know what I mean? But the mark of a great team is being able to battle through self-inflicted adversity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That can really get you down.
Oh, yeah. And that to me is what that showed. And to the very end, where I knew that this team still had a lot of fight until there was going to be double zeros left on the clock. So after Jaden Greathouse's touchdown, they're running off the field. Marcus Freeman's on the sideline. He's like, that's one.
That's one.
That's one. You want to talk about where the mindset of this team was? Everybody was heartbroken for the seniors. Jaden Greathouse had a quote in the locker room, and he was like, I've never had a feeling like this. I'm ready to get back to South Bend, get back to work.
Yeah. I love that, by the way.
Oh, I mean, this is going to be a team where they respond. You know what I'm saying? And whether that is in a week or in 277 days, they're going to respond. And it's going to be really fun to watch moving forward. But this has been my favorite season by far of being a Notre Dame fan. And I'm happy that my favorite season also got to come at a time when I started to get to cover the team too. That's a really cool parallel. I'm not saying Notre Dame won a New Year's Six Bowl this year because I started covering the team in that same year, but I'm not saying that's not the reason. But in all seriousness, it was a lot of fun, man. And this team has done a lot of great things moving forward. Where they've came from September 7th to now is spectacular. And something that I didn't expect, if I'm being honest with you. After September 7th, it was take it week by week, hope they make the playoff. If they get a home bid, hopefully they rip off a win.
Yeah.
But
I think I might have even said, Trev, at the time that the odds of them I think they can still make the playoffs, but the odds of you getting a home game are not great. And they kept battling. And look, part of that was because other teams couldn't handle success and failure because they couldn't battle each week and win like Notre Dame did. But to not only get to the playoff, but to get a home game, dominate a team, get what we asked for. You and I were the same way. Hey, look, I want Georgia in the second round or an Oregon or Ohio State because that's how you prove yourself. And you got Georgia and you beat them. And then you got Penn State, a team that we'd said all year, that's the team I want to play. And they beat them. And you want to prove yourself against Ohio State because you want to. And this is what Jeremiah Love said about Ohio State. He didn't say, I want Ohio State. Like Vanderbilt was like, bring on Bama. No, they remember that back in the day when they started off 4-0, they're like, bring on Bama, and Alabama just annihilated them next week.
59-0.
But what he said was, they're the best, and I want to beat the best. That was respect. I don't want Ohio State to go get upset by some inferior opponent. They're the best team, and if we want to be the best team, it was him saying what I've been saying all year or all playoff, which is, to be the man, you got to beat the man. And this year, Ohio State was the man. And you had to go beat them, and they couldn't get it done. But now you know where you are as a program. Now you need to know we're going to get better. And as we kind of dive into the offseason, those are things that we're going to discuss is where is this program good enough right now? I mean, you always try to get better everywhere. But where is this program championship level right now, and where is it not? And are some of those reasons why they're not is because they're young or they're banged up, or you don't have the talent, or you don't have the coaching or whatever. That's what a lot of our offseason is going to be about. But none of it takes away from how this, as we said last night, this team, if Notre Dame does what you and I think they're going to do the next 4 or 5 years, we're going to look back as this team is the one that laid the foundation for it.
It's really exciting to have this conversation. Last thing that I'll say before we get to some of the super chats that we have in here. But last thing I'll say is it's a lot more of a fun conversation to have and something that I'm looking forward to say, what do they need to do to become a championship caliber football team when they made the national championship this year? You know what I'm saying? It's a lot easier to have that conversation after that than after going 9-4. And yes, you got to win in the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl, but I don't think after that win over South Carolina, after going 8-4 in the regular season, people are like, look out, Natty, And so it's a good spot to be in as a program. It's a good spot to be in as a program, man. I'm excited.
And final thing too is, because we still have a lot of Ohio State fans, that's a heck of a football team. And this was not a Notre Dame should have dominated and they peed that game away. Notre Dame missed a lot of opportunities to have a shot to win, but they would have had to make a lot of plays because that's a good football team. They coached well last night. They played hard last night, and they made the plays last night, and they earned their championship, right? And hats off to them. And I don't love the fan base, but I'll be honest about that. It's one of my least favorite fan bases. But in my hope for humanity being restored thing, there were 7, 8, 9 at least Ohio State fans in our chat that I'm like, dude, I hope that guy stays after the season. Like, I know he's an Ohio State fan, but like, that guy talks ball. That guy's respectful. That guy, Archer's obviously won, but I was happy about that. They're actually even in midst of a lot of the craziness of some of the other stuff and the insults and and just some of the nastiness. There was a decent amount of Ohio State fans on Twitter engaging with me and in our chats. And I'm like, maybe there are some good Ohio State fans out there. So I appreciate that. And that's not meant to be an insult, because I'm sure that they deal with some knucklehead Notre Dame fans as well. But I was encouraged by that too. And we appreciate y'all as well. It's been a fun week and a half. Didn't end how we wanted it to end, Trev, but this ride was a blast. But we're not done. All right. So we'll after this show, we're going to have some super chats here. So hit your like button, hit your subscribe button, hit your notification bell. Make sure that you're signed up for the message board at boards.irishbreak.com. We may take tomorrow off because, honestly, guys, I've got to give my throat a day of rest. So we may take tomorrow off. That's why you need to make sure you hit the notifications. But whenever we do come back, whether that's tomorrow or on Thursday, bro, we are diving into kind of recapping the season with a look ahead, kind of all into some of our shows. We're going to have a lot of fun stuff planned where we're going to kind of take a look back at the season, what went right, what went wrong, with the thought of what needs to get better for Notre Dame to get to that pinnacle. Some of it will be looking at that. Some will be looking at the rosters, all those type of things. So I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. So, and we may even, I'll get with, we may still do a show today. I'll see if there's anyone that can do a show with Trevor and what we may be able to do. So that's what I'm saying. We're definitely not doing a show. We just may not do a show tomorrow. I'm going to see if I can have somebody kind of do it with Trevor, but maybe like a like a midweek mailbag type of thing as we transition into the off season stuff. But that's why you need to make sure you hit that notification bell. So if we do a show tomorrow, you'll get that notification letting you know what we're going to do. So make sure you do that here before we get over to the super chats.
All right, Brian, we got a couple of super chats in here, and thank you guys again for the super chats. So before we do get dived into that, I know, Brian, you talked about notification bell. We got to stay in the loop with all that, but also message boards. Don't forget the message boards.
Yeah, I sent that message, Trev, before I ended up just go ahead and doing it. So that's my bad on that one.
No worries, man. No worries. Super chat from Christopher Galloway. Thank you, Christopher. Unfinished business 2025. Let's go.
No doubt, Christopher. No doubt, man. I mean, and that's the thing is, like, you look at this team and there's a text, or not text, a tweet that I saw that was like, I think the last 5 national champions have had the most draft picks in that upcoming draft. Part of that's because teams that win get guys overdrafted. I mean, when Georgia won their first title, I think they're like 4th string tight end got drafted. Come on, bro. You know what I mean? Like Michigan had 5 guys in the 7th round last year. But there's also a reason that they won the title because they have a very talented roster. And with Ohio State, they have a lot of, like Michigan last year and then Ohio State this year, they have a lot of veterans.
Oh, yeah.
And Ohio State loses a lot of players. Now, they're going to reload. That's where their program is. I mean, they reload all the time. This isn't like they're going to suck next year. They're going to be a team to, contend with again next year. But in Notre Dame's case, they don't lose a lot of volume. Now, they lose some very important players. Riley Leonard. You're going to lose Xavier Watts. You're going to lose Riley Mills. You're going to lose Howard Cross. You're going to lose Jack Kaiser. You're going to lose Jordan Clark. So you're losing some very key players, but you're not losing a lot of players.
Right.
And especially when you consider how much depth Notre Dame played this year. So the way this season went, with the faith that I have in Coach Freeman to, have that desire to get better. Like somebody on the board put something like, I hope Freeman doesn't lose the edge. And I'm like, that's the last thing I'm worried about with Marcus Freeman. Like, will he push the right buttons? That we don't know. We got to see to become a champion because he hasn't won a championship yet. So we don't know if he can push the buttons to win it all. We know he can push the buttons to get him there, but to win it all, he's got to, you don't know that until you prove it. We didn't know Lou Holtz had that until 1988, right? But, Bobby Bowden went a long time before we knew whether or not he could get that team over the hump. You know what I'm saying, Trev? Like, and Jim Harbaugh, I mean, how many years did it take Jim Harbaugh to win a title at Michigan?
No.
So almost a decade. So point being, we'll find out if he's got that. But like, dude, there's a level of, okay, he's shown me enough that when I look at the talent coming back and the talent coming in to start getting really excited about this next year's team. And we'll have a lot to talk about that in the offseason. So I'm with you, Christopher. No doubt.
Christopher, it's giving me revenge tour vibes. I don't know if you guys saw the video of Marcus Freeman before he went into the locker room, watched the video. Yeah. And he's big with like, hold on to that pain. Like that's kind of a big thing that he talks about.
Yeah.
And his facial expressions watching that video, like it was 2025 is going to be fun.
He's not going to lose that edge.
Sure.
The only way I would have been worried about losing the edge is if they would have won last night.
I mean, honestly.
But I mean, that's the only way that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And even then, I'll be like, well, now let's win two. I mean, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Super chat from Tyler Evans. Thank you, Tyler. I just want to say I'm proud of this team and the resiliency to fight back. I believe this team next year will have a vengeance with Marcus Freeman at the helm. I believe we hold a national championship.
I'm with you. I said before the season, Trevor, that, and I picked Notre Dame to play for the title once we got to the playoff. Like last night's game is the only playoff game I got wrong in my predictions. I think you did as well. No, you outside of Ohio State beating Tennessee. So then you would have obviously lost that whole track. So I'm sorry about that. For some reason thinking you got them all right, but like I got them all right until last night. But I did not think Notre Dame. I did not have Notre Dame as a no doubt they're going to be in the championship game before the season. I thought they were a playoff team. I thought they maybe could be a semifinal team. I was not like, yeah, this is a championship team. There were still some question marks we had about this team. So they even went beyond what I thought possible, and especially after the loss of Northern Illinois, you're like, yeah, this team I don't know that this team has it. But what I said before the season, Trev, was they're going to win a title in the next 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I said all that stuff is I didn't even think this was a team that would even be here. So it wasn't like this was your best shot. Right. I thought next year was going to be your best shot, and then maybe 26 an even greater shot. Now that 26 schedule is a little bit rough, but when you look at the talent the next 2 years, you're like, dude, this team is really loaded. So there's no reason that my confidence that my prediction of they're going to win a title the next 3 years, there's no way that's going to go down now after what we just saw. Right. It's like, all right, they're not going anywhere.
I'm with you. Super chat from Nashville Irish. Thank you for the super chat. Great job again, guys. Your analysis is spot on. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you for that very much.
Super chat from West Palm Pat. Thank you for the super chat. Marcus Freeman inherited a Notre Dame program that lacked elite players at quarterback, wide receiver, D-line, and cornerback. Marcus Freeman has addressed corner, but the other three positions still lack elite players. This showed last night.
Disagree with that.
Yep.
I don't agree with the quarterback being in that conversation. Receiver, sure. I mean, we can have that conversation. You know, there's a lot. Trev, you talked about it last night, or was it in the BISO hold? Was it the BISO hold? Or was it just a personal conversation?
No, it's just after the show, me, you, and Sean sat down. And
I knew we in this format. It's like,
Yeah.
look, I got to see it with the receivers next year, and that's fair. And we'll have a lot of talk about the receivers this year. I'm going to be excited about the potential of the group, but we should all have even with Malachi Fields and Greathouse and there's going to be a healthy level of, yeah, it's potential, but I got to see it.
Yep.
You know, so that's fair. D-line certainly lacked elite talent, although I still say if Boubacar Traore is going on game number 16 of experience, we might be having a different conversation watching him and Bryce Young coming off the edge on opposite sides. Inside is more of my concern than the edge right now. They've just got to be healthy on the edge, and they got to keep recruiting more Boubacars and Bryce Youngs. That's going to be the key, and that's what I don't know that they can do. So I disagree with you at quarterback. I think CJ Carr is an elite player. I had him as a 5-star recruit. That's not – I mean, it's just – I had Kenny Minchie as a top 100 player. I got Blake Hebert as a top 150 player. You have you have a former top 100 player that could move back to the position who started for you and put 45 points up against an SEC team that was ranked in a bowl game. And he's currently a walk-on receiver. You know, like, I'm sorry. Quarterback, I disagree with you on. D-line, I agree with you on. It's not elite, and it's got to get better. Can you win a championship without elite D-line talent? Yeah, but you got to make up for it in a lot of other ways, and last night they couldn't make up for it. They couldn't. And then receiver, I'm with you there. Right now, I think there's a lot of talent there, but is it an elite group? No, it's not. It's not close to an elite group right now. They need Cam Williams to hit. They need Micah Gilbert to hit. They need to see what we saw the last couple of weeks from Jordan Faze or from Jaden Greathouse to become like a normal thing. They need Malachi Fields to be what we think he can be. You know, they need to have some of those guys pan out. They need to hopefully they can keep KK Smith here and get him healthy and learn to use him better. So there's potential there for that to become a big time group. Is it going to be what Ohio State had this year? No, but they don't need that. I mean, they put in work against what people felt was the best secondary college football last year with what they have now. I mean, they put in work against Ohio State last night. Yeah. Imagine what it's going to be like when you get Malachi Fields and if Cam Williams is as good as we hope think we can be, and if Micah Gilbert's as good as we hope he can be, and you know, Greathouse is only going to get better, and Jordan Faison hopefully can be healthy next year, and you know, so that one I would say agree with you where it is now, but I like the potential of it becoming championship caliber, because there's a difference between, okay, you're Ohio State or LSU 19 or Clemson 18 and your championship caliber, because of the nature of what your offense does. Ohio State needs their receivers to be as good as they are because of how they run their offense. Notre Dame doesn't need Ohio State's caliber receivers because they run a different style. Yep. You know, they just need them to be really good though. Right? I'm not saying like this year's good enough. It's not. It's definitely not. Like definitely not. But they don't need to be Ohio State or they got no shot. That's my point. Because whose receivers had more yards last night? I think it was Notre Dame's, wasn't it?
Yeah, Riley Leonard had more passing yards last night than Will Howard did. So, yeah, I mean, I'm with you at wide receiver. I said it last night. I just have to see it. And it's not that I don't doubt that the potential's there. Yeah. But for me, the potential's been there for 3 years.
100%.
And so, like, that's why I need to, you know.
Trev, we could list off, you know, Tobias Merriweather and Braylon James and, you know, there's a lot of players, Lorenzo Styles and, you know, Deion Colsey. And there's a lot of guys we could point to as like, hey, boy, if that guy can tap in his potential, he could be really, really good. And none of them have so far. Jaden Greathouse is starting to. Yep. But can they build on that? It's a fair question. I mean, Jordan Faison took a step back in production this year and played a lot more games. Now, a lot of reasons why. Ball was spread around more. You were more of a running team this year. He battled injuries all year. It's fair. But it's still the reality. I know that there's reasons for it, but he's got to show that he can go be a more consistently productive player. Yeah. So, sure. Yeah, it's got to get better. But I'm not as down on it as you are from a talent standpoint. It's just you got to develop it. And those guys got to have a little bit of an edge to it. That's what I loved about Greathouse's comment last night. And I hope and knowing him, I think that's 100% how he feels. And he'll do it. Oh, yeah. Because he's a worker. Yeah, I'm excited about the potential. But, yeah, there's no doubt, West Palm, Pat, that there's areas they got to get better. Yep. No question.
Super chat from JP Poole. Thank you for the super chat. Since other teams do it, Notre Dame should claim the 11 national championships they don't claim due to not winning outright, which they choose willingly to do.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, there's a lot of things I think Notre Dame should do. It's like if other teams are going to use a certain standard and claim they've won more titles than you, then you should. But Notre Dame's like, we don't care about what other people do. We're going to do what we do. I respect that as well. I don't have a problem with Notre Dame not doing it. I wouldn't have a problem if they decided to do it.
Yeah.
Like another thing that every team should do is every team should go back and add bowl stats into their records. You know what I mean? So like Barry Sanders' all-time rushing record should not be the 26 whatever it is. It should be with the 200-plus yards he also had in the bowl game against Wyoming.
Yep.
Which would get him close to 3,000. In 12 games, 11 regular season and a bowl game. In the Big 8. I mean, that guy was, oh my goodness gracious.
That's nuts.
Unbelievable. This is one of our Ohio State fans that I've enjoyed. He's been in it for a while.
Super chat from Mike Farino. Thank you, Mike. How's it going, Brian? It was a great game. Notre Dame didn't quit, and Great House is going to be a monster next year. Not many people can make Downs miss a tackle. I
mean, he's spot on. And that's what we said earlier, Trev. Like, this isn't like this is why Xavier Watts is better than Caleb Downs. I didn't say that. What I said was he'd have made anybody miss on that play the way the sick move he put on that guy. Xavier would have missed there. Hamilton would have missed there. Harrison Smith would have, well, maybe not Harrison Smith, but you know what I'm saying. Like, he was making anybody miss there. Malachi Starks would have missed there. Adon Schuler would have missed there. Lathan Ransom would have missed there. That was a sick move. But yeah, he's going to be a dude. Yeah, not too bad for a guy with, rec league basketball moves, according to one of those clowns from CBS Sports whose name isn't even worthy of being mentioned on my show ever again. But yeah, he's a dude. He's a dude. Mike, I'm only going to say it's only going well if you don't tell me you're not going to be in the show moving forward because they don't play each other. So just assume, Mike, that Notre Dame and Ohio State are going to play again in the playoffs next year. So you need to stay watching our show all off season and the season. That's how I feel about it, Mike.
I mean, Notre Dame and Ohio State have played every single season that Marcus Freeman's been at the helm. I have every reason to believe that they're going to play again next year.
You need to be locked in the off season, Mike, and doing your opposition prep this off season, watching our show, buddy. So we appreciate you, man. Appreciate you.
Super chat from Berto2121. Thank you for the super chat. I couldn't watch live. Thanks to Irish Breakdown for helping make this season even more memorable. My fear has been a repeat of Notre Dame teams like 2012. Big thanks to Brian and Trev and the board for dampening those fears. The future's bright.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. Third quarter, I'm thinking this is going to be like 2012. I mean, 31-7. We were all waiting on it to become. And look how Ohio State was going to be slowing down anytime soon. It looked like we were on our way to that. But this team showed a lot of heart. And their talent started making plays too, right? But I appreciate you, Berto.
Super chat from Daniel Flagstad. Thank you, Daniel. You guys are the best, and we appreciate all that you do. It was a shame to see the defense go from aggressive and attacking to soft bend, but don't break. It was an odd choice. Still an amazing season. They are on the right path.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. Like somebody on the board who's one of my favorite posters, he was in the middle of the game, he was frustrated. And this is when Notre Dame was getting blown out. So I would imagine he changed his tune a little bit, but he was just frustrated. He's like, it's just always one step forward, two steps back. And I was like, look, if this game continues in this path, it's a step back, but it's not two steps back. This season was like 5 steps forward and 1 step back, with this game. It isn't that. But but to your point, it is still an amazing season, and they are absolutely on the right path. There's no question about it.
Big super chat from Miles Whitaker. Thank you, Miles. Thank you very much. Looking forward to a playoff home game next year. I hope a day game. I wouldn't exchange the Notre Dame-Indiana game experience for anything, but it was so cold. But the next time I watch on TV a home game Notre Dame in December, I can brag that I've been there too.
Yeah. Man. That was a heck of an environment. I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, Vince and I could have been out of the cold the entire time, and we chose to stay outside for the first couple quarters, basically, because it was just like the experience was so amazing. It was such a great environment.
Yeah, I went with my dad, and I'm going to remember that game for the rest of my life. That was a couple of days after my grandpa passed away, and I got to go and have that experience with my dad. And I'm not going to lie, it might sound corny, but I was freezing up until I went to the bookstore in the middle of the IB tailgate to try to buy a coat because and it's not like I wasn't wearing a t-shirt. I mean, I was
And
in
you're a
multiple
Northern
layers.
Indiana kid.
I know.
So it's not like, yeah.
It was cold, man. But the second I got into that stadium, didn't even matter. I mean, that place was rocking. It was awesome.
Yeah, it really was. Thanks for the super chat, Miles.
Mm-hmm. Super chat from Aiden Benami. Thank you, Aiden. What cast did you guys watch? Sound on or off?
I watched the normal ESPN one, and I just basically had the sound down because I needed to hear any updates. But I was pretty good at just trying to. I think I'm pretty good at just kind of ignoring it to a degree. But there's a couple times you're just like, good God, Chris Fowler. I just really dislike him doing games. I really do. I do want to speak on something because I saw a lot of people getting pissed off at Kirk Herbstreit because he was crying after the game. As y'all know, his son won a national championship last night at his alma mater. And Kirk Herbstreit has had some takes that I've had a lot of issues with how he's covered the sport this season. A lot of issues. But take away my feelings on the job he's done as a professional, as a human being. He's been through a lot this last year. And he got to call the game, and I don't think he was unfair calling the game. I don't. I mean, he did a normal but once the game's over with, and you're watching your son down there at your alma mater celebrating with his teammates, and you start thinking about the loss he's had and his dog, which I think for Trev, how you and I view dogs, it's like losing a family member, and he's had some other health. I mean, this has been a tough year for him, and I would just tell a lot of you is, for 5 minutes, just try to separate your feelings of him as a broadcaster to your feelings of him as a human being, as a man who was enjoying, a moment with his family and getting through a trying year, and not have everything necessarily is about football. But that's a dad who was watching his son celebrate a national championship, who's on the team at Ohio State at his alma mater. I'd have shed a tear too. And that doesn't make me a homer or biased or anti-Notre Dame or whatever. Sometimes we just need to – this is still sports, and that's a man who's been through some stuff in his life that to me is a little bit more important than whatever we feel about his bias towards Notre Dame and some of the awful takes he's had about Indiana. None of that stuff changes. I'm not saying he gets a pass for that, but sometimes we need to separate and say, this isn't about that. This is about Kirk Herbstreit, the human being. And sometimes we got to learn to give a little grace to certain people. Some people don't necessarily deserve that, I would say. Well, God would say that they deserve it, but as a human, I would say they don't. Kirk Herbstreit's had some bad takes here. He's not a bad guy. And he's a father. And he got to experience something last night that a lot of fathers wish they could experience. And I just wish some of us would be maybe a little bit more human in how we view some of these things sometimes. I just needed to say that, and I felt that was the opportunity to kind of get that in.
No, I appreciate that, and I'm in the same boat. I talked to a couple of Notre Dame fans that I'm friends with, and they brought it up about how Kirk Herbstreit shouldn't be allowed to call in the booth when Ohio State is. Look, if you're going to have that opinion on Kirk Herbstreit doing that, then you also can't be super hyped up when Ryan Clark talks really highly about Jordan Clark and Notre Dame on any show that he goes on, because then you immediately have to insert whatever biases and preconceived notions that you had about Kirk Herbstreit. And that's not a knock on Ryan Clark. I love that he did it. I mean, he's supporting his son. I mean, he talked about live that he was, the second you brought up that game, I got sweaty. It's like I no longer become Ryan Clark, the TV personality. I'm Ryan Clark, the dad. I'm getting ready to go watch my son play on the biggest stage. He left Arizona State. You know what I'm saying? He left Kenny Dillingham to go take this shot and go and take advantage of this opportunity to go play at Notre Dame, and it paid off. He went and played in the national championship, and like we said last night, I think Jordan Clark made a little bit of money after last night's performance. I really do. But that was my counter to it, because it's,
him crying at the end of the game has nothing to do. He shouldn't have been there because he's in Ohio State. That's nonsense. Yeah. A fan base that's begging NBC to hire a former Notre Dame player to cover. There's nothing wrong with him being an Ohio State guy calling that game. He has no impact on the game. He talks a lot more about Ohio State, yeah, they were winning 31-7. They should have been talking more about Ohio State. They were dominating the game, and I just think sometimes we as Notre Dame fans, we have a reason to be upset with how Notre Dame's covered. But sometimes we just gotta be able to say, you're taking yourself way too seriously right now, and just have a heart for 5 minutes and move on and let it go. Because I think those reactions say more about us than they do about Kirk Herbstreit.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm saying.
Fair enough.
The guy had a pretty awesome moment last night, and let it go. Let him have it and move on.
Another super chat from Miles Whitaker. Thank you, Miles. I really want to ask your opinion on the quarterback situation next year, but you've said that is a conversation for a later time. So I'll just commend Irish Breakdown on a great season of content.
Well, I mean, because you gave a $20 super chat, I'm going to give you a little thoughts on it, and we'll have chances to do full shows on it. But I'm excited about the quarterback situation. And Trev, you and I were having this discussion the other day where it's a tough, like, what if Riley Leonard tomorrow, the NCAA said, okay, we're giving everybody a 5th year. And we talked, like, it'd be hard to say no to Riley Leonard. It'd be really hard to say no because of the known. And I've said, like, man, could you imagine if the offseason allows Riley Leonard to play all season like he did kind of in the second half against Penn State and Ohio State? Pretty dang good offense. But at the same time, I'm also kind of like, I love the kid and I love what he's done. And I'd have a hard time if you had that situation, but I'm also kind of glad that I don't have to make that decision, because I'm really excited to see that next generation get their opportunity, whether it's CJ or Kenny or Steve. And I have my opinion on who I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be CJ. But I've also said, but if Kenny Minchie wins that battle, my optimism for the position doesn't decrease an inch, a centimeter. Because if Kenny's good enough to beat out CJ, that means Kenny's going to be really good. And I'd argue the same about Steve Angeli if it's a genuine quarterback battle. And he's not getting it just because he's the veteran or he's more experienced, because I don't care about that as much. I care about what can you become, not what you are in game 1. Who's going to be better by game 10? But if it's a genuine battle and Steve outplays those guys, then I'm going to be pretty excited about what Steve's going to bring to the table, because he's going to be poised.
Oh,
the moment won't be too big for him. So however that shakes out, as long as it's a real battle, I'm excited about what the quarterback position is going to look like next year. And I don't think they're going to have to carry the team early on like Riley did for a lot of reasons, which we'll talk about this offseason. But I'm excited about the quarterback position moving forward. I really am. And I'm excited about what it can do next year. And I'm excited about what it's going to look like in 2026 when whoever the starter is has a year under his belt. Like, it's going to be a fun ride. It's going to be fun. So I am looking forward to it. And that doesn't have anything to do with Riley Leonard or whether or not I think he's a heck of a quarterback. I'm just really, really excited to see what this quarterback room is going to look like, because I think it's a very talented room. And then you see Blake Hebert in the pregame, some of the pregame videos, you're like, that's the most jacked dude in the room, is the kid who should be in his getting ready to start his second semester of his senior year of high school. That dude is jacked. He's a thick boy. He looks like like a taller version of Bryson Daly. Like, so it's a very talented room, and I'm excited about the future of the room. There's no question about it.
Yep. I'm with you. It's going to be a new age. It's going to feel like I already feel kind of the grumblings of it. You know what I mean? But it's just, yeah, I'm ready to kind of take that next step and go away from the one and dones.
Yeah,
I am. Super chat from A. Reagan. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you guys for the season. I'm proud of this team and proud of the fight. Pre-order 2026 national championship gear right now. I'm calling it now, Brian.
Here's my question. When you say 2026 gear, are you talking about what the playoff committee will count as the 2026, which is next year? Or are you referring to the 2026 season? Because this is where it gets super confusing, because all the patches for the teams playing last night in the playoffs, it all said 2025. 2025 playoff, which I hate. It should be the season that you played. It's the 24 season. But that makes it you a question. So when you say A. Regan 2026, how much time do I have? Is it the 2026 season? Or are you talking about the 2026 playoff, which will be a year from now?
I think I think he's talking about the 2025 season, but the 2026 national championship, because I think all of the gear, because like the gear for like Ohio State winning all says 2025 national champions. So I think,
Right.
yeah.
I just need to know how much time I have. So, I'd like to know the answer to that question.
Fair.
Salty Virginia Peanuts with a super sticker. Appreciate you, Salty. And here we go from Riley Welker.
Super chat from Riley. Thank you, Riley. I like a tough schedule moving forward. That way, you know those teams are going to be a battle tested. Freeman is going to have the edge for years.
I sure hope so. I think great advice here from Robert Nash. Just win them both. Hey, I'll take that.
Love that.
I'll take that. No question. No question. Oh, sorry. We have this one from Salty.
Another super chat from Salty. Thank you, Salty. Brian, I worry that the four captains, especially Mills and Kaiser, were exceptional in setting the culture. Team chemistry, culture was so important this year. Should I be worried about next season?
Worried? No, from the standpoint of I wouldn't be concerned about it. But if you're going to use the term worried as in like, well, we need to see how it's established, that's fair. There's always a level of unknown to what the leadership is going to look like from year to year in college football, Salty. There's no question. And so in that regard, I do think that there is a, hey, let's see how it goes. And it doesn't guarantee that it's always going to be good. But number one, that's partly on coaching to establish that culture. And the other part is there's a lot of young players that had to take on leadership positions this year as well. And when I look, I mean, you got to think about it. Like Notre Dame was down. They had 5 captains to start the season.
Mm-hmm.
It was Mills. I mean, it was Leonard, Mills, Kaiser, Morrison, and Watts. And they were down 2 of those guys for the last 3 games.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course, you had Kaiser left, you had Watts left, and you had Leonard left. So you kind of had to learn to live. But when I look at guys like Drake Bowen, when I look at guys like a Don Schuler, they're not your typical like captains per se, because they're only going to be juniors next year, and the odds of Notre Dame having like 3 junior captains next year is slim. But when I look at Jaden Greathouse on offense, when I look at some of the guys, like if Pat Coogan comes back next year, even if he's not a starter, he's going to be a culture guy. He's going to be establishing the culture guy. There's a lot of guys like that, Trev, where who the captain is going to be. I don't know who the captain's going to be next year, especially since your junior class is probably going to be your dominant class next season, not your senior class or your sophomore class. So there's always a concern about it. And Salty went on later to say that he thought that Mills, Kaiser, and Leonard were exceptional leaders, and you were spot on. But that wasn't true in week 2. Like that had to be developed, and it'll have to be developed next year. And so my point is simply that there's always a level of, I need to see it with leadership. And so there's a worry simply from an, I need to see it standpoint. But if you're going to use worry from like an anxiety standpoint, a stress standpoint of it, I don't know. I wouldn't worry in that regard. That's kind of, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I'd say it. There's a level of, like Trev is with the receivers, there's a level of, I need to see it in this conversation. But I look at this team and I'm saying there's a lot of captain caliber. Jeremiah Love. I forgot to mention Jeremiah Love. There's a lot of guys like that you look at and say, there's a lot of captain caliber kids coming back on this football team next year, which is why I don't have any concern. I don't have any concern about it outside of just, we don't know. So
I'll say this, Salty. I'm a big believer that when culture is strong enough, like that doesn't leave with the players that started it. Does that make sense? Like I think when you have that strong of an identity as like players, I don't think that leaves with them. You know what I mean? And to Brian's point, there's a lot of young guys to keep it going. But we all talk about it. Your team emulates who your head coach is.
Right.
And so as long as Marcus Freeman stays the course of what he was basically from September 8th to January 20th.
Right. And Mike Denbrock.
Yeah.
And Mike Mickens. And right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
As long as that remains constant, I have a lot of faith, but I do still have to see it. Like, I have a lot of faith in the receiver room. I just have to see it. Yep.
But do you question whether there'll be leadership in the room? Because that I don't.
Oh, leadership? No.
Right,
I mean, they
right.
had that this year with Jaden Greathouse. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
Bo Collins was a great teammate. Chris Mitchell was a great teammate this year. Jordan, I mean, and that's the thing is like the transfers weren't the impact guys, but they weren't problems either. They
Right.
were good kids and hard workers and team guys. And, and I'll respect the heck out of Bo Collins and Chris Mitchell and that. Yeah, they weren't the playmakers maybe we hoped they would be, but they were great teammates. And, they still did some good things this season. But, yeah, I'm not concerned about it at this point in time. Salty says, Brian, I need you to say it, the great one. I can read it when you say the great one. I will never refer to Jaden Greathouse that way, but I'll read the words that you put in your super chat, the great one.
Nice.
So there you go. You got your wish is my command, Salty.
There we go. Super chat from Ethan Kaufman. Thank you, Ethan. The most proud of a Notre Dame team I've ever been with all the injuries that occurred. Marcus cannot have an NIU kind of loss again next year.
If an NIU loss again next year sparks that team to another run of the championship game, then frickin' bring it on. I mean, I hope that they don't need to get that. I hope they don't need that kind of loss again to motivate this team. But if that's what it takes every year to get to the national championship, then sign me up. You know what I mean? Because again, it's not what happens to you in your lowest. And I said this at the time. It's not what this game will not define this football team. Do you remember when we talked about this?
Oh, yeah.
So this loss will not define this football team. How they respond to this loss will define this football team. And the response was pure brilliance. I mean, it was an unbelievable run. So I hope, Ethan, that they don't need that kind of thing next year. But every team needs some level of adversity. I mean, Ohio State people will tell you if they don't lose to Michigan, honest Ohio State people will tell you that if they don't lose to Michigan, maybe they don't go on this run. Sometimes you need that adversity to happen to a really talented team to kind of wake you up and say, we're not playing our if they don't have that big, hourly, what they say, like 3 hours. It's like a 3-hour team meeting after the Michigan loss, something like that.
Yeah, like a player-led 3-hour. Yeah.
If that doesn't lead all to that, do they go win the championship? I don't know. We'll never know. But a lot of people credit it to that. And they had that moment for them. So sometimes you need those type of things. You need those type of things to happen to kind of wake you up. And, this team needed that this year. I hope in the future they don't need that. But if it happens, it happens.
Sure.
As long as the response is a national championship, then sure, sign me up.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
I'm with you.
But I do appreciate the super chat, Ethan, very much. And I understand the point of what he's making. Like you should not need that next year to also motivate you. But they're going to be a young team again next year. So you're going to need some level of adversity to happen at some point to kind of rally the team together. And that's what happens with a lot of great teams is you need that moment, like, hey, we got to figure some stuff out. I mean, early in 2019, LSU almost lost to Texas and then almost lost to Auburn. People forget that. And those things kind of made that team grow up and be like, hey, we can't just roll the ball out and just have everybody lay over and die. We got to earn it. And then after that, they just then they went nuts.
Yeah.
And became what they became.
Mm-hmm.
It's what Ohio State, their last 2 national championships, they had bad losses at home.
Yeah.
Both years that served as motivation to kind of get them going. The Virginia Tech loss in 2014 isn't a whole lot better than losing to Northern Illinois. It's not as bad, but it's not a whole lot worse. That was not a very good Virginia Tech team. And this Michigan team's not very good. Clemson and losing an 8-5 Pitt team in 2016. Sometimes you need that kind of that thing to say, we got to wake up, guys. We're not good enough to just roll the balls out there and expect the other team to just lay down and die.
Right.
We got to earn it. And they need those motivating games. Hopefully it just doesn't come against a MAC team again. But if it means championship at the end of the year, sign me up. Sign me up. But I do get Ethan's point. I really do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with that. I would even go out on a limb and say that I think, and hear me out. Disclaimer. I'm not saying that Notre Dame is done getting upset. I'm not saying that. I think that they are, with Freeman at the helm and all of his learning experiences and whatnot, I think they're done losing to the Northern Illinois-esque type of programs. I do. And I can, after the run that they went on this season, I think I can confidently say that. I'm not saying that they're never going to lose a game where they're favorited. That's, and I'm not even going to say they're never going to lose another, because there's two trains of thought. It's like, well, Northern Illinois went 8-5. It's like they did, right? Michigan also went 8-5. Michigan and Northern Illinois are two different teams, two different programs, right? Like it's like I would agree that they are done losing, or I would say that they're done losing to the Northern Illinois.
I hope
caliber.
so, yeah.
But but they're not done being upset. Like that just happened.
The odds of Notre Dame going 16. I mean, the team that won the title this year that everybody thinks is, people are like, oh, how does this team stack up against past champions? Like, okay, the last champion that I think this team beats probably is 17 Bama. Like, this is not like an all-time great team. It's the best team in college football this year, but like, can't we just enjoy it being the best team in this year without trying to stack it up against 22 Georgia and 21? Just enjoy that they won it this year. I get so sick of that. How does this team rank? I'm like, just who cares? Those teams didn't exist. This Ohio State team would have got smacked by 2018 Clemson. I believe that. But who cares? So would everybody else in college football got smacked by 2018 Clemson. There's no team like that this year. That doesn't take away from Ohio State's championship at all. Nor would it have taken away from Notre Dame's championship. But the point is that team lost 2 games. 2 games. In this era, we have to look at championships a little differently now in this current era than we did in the past, where a lot of teams were like undefeated and 1 loss. And there's going to be more 2-loss champions. Just the nature of the playoff. And the key is just do what you got to do to get there and be reaching your peak when you get there. Ohio State went through some ups and downs, some peaks and valleys this year, but when they got to the playoff, they peaked. They were hot. They played their best football in their last 4 games. That's all that matters. I mean, Michigan fans are going to be, well, we beat you. We still beat you. And, if I was not, so? You know what I mean? Like, nobody cares, dude. You still suck. Yeah, we had a bad game, and we still have a championship, and you don't. We won last year. Who cares? I ain't talking about old stuff. You know what I mean? Jim Harbaugh's not your coach anymore. Nobody cares.
Right.
And that's how I'd feel if Notre Dame won the championship. You think I'm going to care about losing Northern Illinois? You think I'm going to care what some Northern Illinois fan says to me? Well, okay. Thanks. Thanks for your assistance to our championship. So that's all. Just win it, man. I don't care how the path is. Just win it.
I'm with you. Well, hey, guys, that's going to do it for us tonight. Thank you for being with us for a little bit over 2.5 hours. There was a lot to uncover, and it was a great season review, right? We're not done completely talking about the 2024 season, but this team as a whole, we know the ride that they went on, and I'm really, really excited to continue that. What's up?
I'm sorry, this is hilarious. Salty said, people say that next season has a tougher schedule. Why? Are there 3 MAC teams on it?
I saw that.
That was awesome. Because you could argue 2 of the toughest games Notre Dame had this season in the regular season were to Northern Illinois and Miami, Ohio.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for that, Salty. I needed it. Even though laughing hurts my throat, that was good.
That was good. No, that was good, Salty. But look, we are TBD for a show tomorrow, like Brian talked about, if there's a way that we can get it going for sure. But, I mean, our guy Brian's got to get the voice right and get back to full health.
I'm going to reach out to, like, Sean and see if, maybe one of those guys can do it with you. But we'll try. We'll try.
But in order to know what we are doing and what we have going on over here at Irish Breakdown, be sure to hit that like button, that subscribe button, hit that notification bell for if we do go live tomorrow. You guys will know exactly when and where. I'll also tweet it out, so you guys will know.
And it'll be on the message board.
It will also be on the message boards, which I highly suggest you guys going and checking out. The way to do that is you go down there, boards.irishbreakdown.com. Check out the message board. There's going to be awesome conversation going on there all offseason long. Like I said, there's 277 days until Notre Dame kicks off again, and that will be 277 days of content being cranked out on the board until Notre Dame kicks off against Miami. So until next time, for Brian, for Trevor, we will see you guys back here really soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.